Hey, how are you, man?
Yeah, how's it going?
Going all right.
Good.
Feeling okay?
Yeah, the pain comes and goes. So I'll try to. I got two drinks here with me. I just took some pain meds, so hopefully it'll be okay.
Nice. Glad to hear
Hey, I wasn't trying to overcomplicate stuff for you.
No, 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 no. And I do actually appreciate you putting it together. Admittedly, man, I'm so hesitant at this point of mute that. I'm very hesitant of um I don't like the leadership position because I find leadership positions often create hierarchy. And at the end of the day, where like nobody is above anybody, and that's where I get really nervous because then I'm kind of like, and I'm like the last person that should ever be in charge of a group of people. So at the end of the day, too, I'm usually sitting there like, no, there's probably some brighter, higher functioning people to take
I
on.
mean, you like initiated it though. You have been building these connections, so it kind of indirectly is yours, and that's not a bad thing. Because you're in a position where you get to straddle both like the fan and like the artist. So, you're kind of in a I mean, we all like buy from each other and collect other stuff or whatever, but it's like, it's okay. That's why I thought the doc was like that way people could like you could kind of pitch stuff in the group chat or whatever, suggest things, and then like me or whoever could paste them into the doc, and then people can kind of talk like away from the chat so that the chat's like a little more focused. That's really all it was. Not
Yeah,
like
and I'm not tech savvy enough either. So I'll be totally honest. One of my biggest fears is the moment. Hey, Scott's in there too. Scott Touchy Design. Nice to see you, man. My biggest fear, admittedly, is uh, um, making anybody like it's so weird how suddenly people can feel very excluded unintentionally.
yeah, that's fair.
It's very unfortunate, but um, and I think discussion for another time, but I think it is one of those things too that it's also kind of like, yeah, well, you try and build a bridge for the first time, it doesn't work either.
Yeah.
So you try again and you try again. So, it is what it is. I think we are still kind of waiting for Trash Joy Studios, and I believe I'm gonna get the name wrong now because I haven't seen them enough. The newer individual that just came in there. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to catch it. My brain's not there today. But there should be two more joining us. Sorry, man.
Oh,
but this is why they come in and do introductions. Because see, now, I know you're Nostalgia. I know Trash Joy Studios, but I haven't met this other guy yet. So
yeah.
once I meet him, then that'll stick.
Yeah, that's fair. This has been cool too, just because like talking to people and instead of just seeing their icon, and because a lot of us don't really post pictures of ourselves too much for whatever reason, and so it's nice, and it's also just to have the dialogue that takes too long to type in comments and texts, and so
The other thing, I think one of the key things you said there is putting a face to like the accounts can make quite a big difference.
mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Especially in a sea of resin.
Yeah.
It's very tough. You're in a unique position though, and I think you know that as well. There isn't much in the style that you're doing it with the amount of ingenuity that you've put into it. I don't think there's much out there in like the exact same like clicking
Yeah.
faction. So
Yeah, that's more like a very long-term goal that I've had for like forever, and I'm finally like at a point kind of work on it. And dude, like I take it to a stupid level on my own. I was like, I'm doing all these test casts. I'm like, uh, it seems like I work really slow because I don't put out a lot of stuff, and but I'm like always fighting with that perfectionist side, right? Where like I'm like, well, these joints don't fit exactly the way I want them to. There's too much play here. It's a little too loose. And it's like, I need to like fix this, and and as I like mold stuff and I'll do all that, I like learn how to do it better and more efficiently. And I've been trying all these different clays and stuff to make, because I'm trying to integrate, new stuff with old stuff, hence the Neo part. And like I just, because Scott Suki had told me, we talk off and on over Instagram and stuff, and we talked about a epoxy sculpt, which I've been trying out the last couple of months, and it takes like a whole day to set. It's like you mix A and B, and it makes like this hard material. And I was like, oh god, I put on like a little bit, and I have to wait a whole day for it to like cure, And I just like looked online yesterday and found that you can like bake it and cure it like in 10 minutes. So I have a little toaster oven back here that like I initially had gotten for like this Sculpey makes this gray clay called Sculpey Firm, which is just one of their bakeable clays. And I did the same thing. I was like, well, I can sculpt a little, bake it, sculpt a little, bake it. And so now I use it for that, and now I use it for epoxy sculpt. I put my casts in and I bake them after I take them out of the pressure pot because it speeds up the curing. So like it's turning into like a little workhorse. I'm just like, I don't know what I do with this. It needs to go faster. Put it in the oven. so, but it's like nice to have like a little controlled, area that I can kind of mess with, and so it's been helpful. I just like learned that yesterday. So I'm just like, oh my god, now I can, work on something and like actually make more significant progress on it because I can kind of build layers up over like the day instead of taking like a week. So just little things like that you learn, it like enhances your ability to get to where you want to go a little sooner, which is nice. So
I think you mentioned something, but I'll admit there's a bunch of you that execute it much better. But I think a bunch of us would definitely consider ourselves perfectionists. But I'm in the habit of saying I'm an imperfect perfectionist, because the reality is that I know at some point I can't fester on it anymore. I will be in analysis paralysis forever, and that's why like my typos, like I know that's one of those things I have to almost just like check out. And I don't think most people realize I'm floating between 3 phones all day, so I don't get used to like one keyboard. So like I actually just don't universally get used to it. But I would say most of the dudes in the scene have a bit of that perfectionist in them. I think it would actually come up a lot, and admittedly, I hope it comes up a lot in the conversation. That's one of the things that people are finding they can almost kind of encourage each other out of, is that analysis paralysis, because I think it's hard to be motivated right now. And it's harder to be motivated when you're fixated on like step 30, but you're in step 1.
Yeah. And like that, I do struggle with that. And, but it's something like, as a history of coming from graphic design and whatnot, like when you do it for a job, right, you don't have infinite time to like fiddle with this thing, whatever the thing is. I don't think it's a saying, but I treat it like one, which is like, when you're doing anything creative, right, there's a point where it's like, it's good enough, ship it. Like you can't, you have to just find the line where like, okay, this is good enough. It does most of the things I need it to do, ship it. Like anything that like could be done better, like are we just noticing it, or is like the audience going to notice it? If the audience notices that, let's fix it. If we're noticing it and hyper focusing on it, it's probably fine, ship it. Like, because you can't just, like you said, you'll just be in this constant loop of like making changes, and the more you change it, the more you want to change it, the more you want to change it, so you just got to like find a point where it's good enough and then let it go.
I will say it depends on the customer. I would have to add that in there. Kurt Floss, how are you? So if anything, the 2 that have joined so far are not even the 2 that I thought were going to be coming in. So I appreciate you guys coming in.
No problem. I mean, I'll stay as long as I can. As long as I keep, I don't know,
making sense.
Chatting, and keep making sense, which I tend to go off on tangents. So don't be afraid to tell me to type down because I'm talking too much.
The safe word will be resin.
Oh.
Get back on target.
All right.
That never comes out of my mouth.
Well, I mean, if you guys felt like it, there's three of us now. I feel like the other guys, as they join, they can kind of hop into the discussion. Today, we're kind of dealing with a bit of a bold one because we're kind of dealing with that whole toy versus art. Is it a toy? Is it art? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? So I appreciate you guys being brave enough to come in and discuss this one.
That's a word for it.
If you guys don't mind, we'll do a little introduction across the room there, and that way anybody watching, they kind of have an idea of who you are in the community.
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan, also known as Kerfloss. I sculpt toys in wax and kind of doing it the old Kenner style. And I also make a 3.75 inch scale armature kit that people can get to make their own action figures.
Hey, I'm Aaron. I go by Nostalgia Toys. I make 5.5 inch He-Man style, like 80s barbarian type figures at the moment. You know, mold cast, do some sculpting, some fabrication, and I'm trying to add in like this interchangeable parts like theme to it. So that's kind of my gimmick.
Thanks for joining us, man. If you wanted to introduce yourself, the other two guys have already given their rundown.
Oh, just replay my one from last time. We'll have cut in the old footage.
This is live, man.
Hi, everybody watching. I'm Shane. I'm Trash Joy Studios. I do resin miniatures, weird little art objects, and trash art kind of stuff. How's it going?
I love it. Awesome. So I was even just kind of telling the other guys we're going to be doing the whole toy versus art debate today. So right off the hop, I'm just going to kind of go over some of the things that when I brought the question out to the community, some of the responses that I kind of got back. Of course, attention. Always got to have that intent. Somebody said opinion. It can be both, one, or neither. That actually went into depends on the person, holder, the collector. There's also the imagination or the skill gone behind the figure, and their backers are art. Somebody said there is no difference. It's all art, but if it's got articulation, it must be a toy. All toys are art, but not all art is a toy. It's an art to make a toy. And then price, licensing, and toys you play with, art you don't. So I figured to kind of start it off, why does it matter or does it even matter? If it's art toy, both? Does it make a difference to you guys?
Go ahead, you guys. I'll just start talking, so feel free to jump in.
There's a lot to unpack there. Or take out of the package, so to speak. Yeah, so intention for sure. But I think art in a lot of ways is a label to help people understand what they're looking at. And to call something a toy comes with an expectation that people have about toys. To call it art comes with the expectation about what art has, what expectations come with art. Both have a level of appreciation that comes with them. Toy enthusiasts, art enthusiasts, art. The term art toy may just be a way to bridge those two appreciations.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think that art is definitely like a term that to the viewer indicates that like what many of us on Instagram or in this scene, so to speak, are doing, right? We're hand making something. Even if you're 3D printing it, you're still digitally sculpting it, whatever. So it's like it's an individual expression of yourself. And that's the art aspect. And then the physicality of it I think is like, and the reflection on pop culture and our like nerdy interests is kind of like where the toy aspect. So it's like Jonathan said, it's kind of like a blend and a bridge of those two worlds. Because if you look at like and like Crumb said about the audience, right? If you look at like people who collect like Marvel Legends or GI Joe or whatever, they don't necessarily think of, they're not looking at the figures necessarily as art. I mean, some of them probably are because you know it's an expression of like that world. But I think like the art would be secondary because they're toy collectors. But it's just perspective, you know. So it just depends on the audience. So like your mint on card going to Walmart, Target, you know, they're like looking for something different than someone who's like on Instagram and like looking at posts and you know buying resin toys and stuff. That doesn't mean they can't overlap. But so I think there's just like different worlds kind of coming together, and Art Toy kind of like pulls those all together and builds that bridge.
Yeah, they don't call it the art aisle at Target, do they? But
That's good, sir.
But you can make your own art out in the craft aisle. I kind of got this notion of it may be a toy in the store, but when you bring it home in the hands of the new owner, perhaps it is appreciated like an art.
Oh yeah, there's people that are like buying.
Too, there's a.
Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just saying. I think too that there's some differentiation that has to be put there where you might say that a piece itself isn't art, but the work that went into making it is. Like a great example might be like Monster in My Pockets. When those were made, somebody commissioned those because they were like, monsters are going to sell good to little kids. They're toys. But the sculpts that went into those are absolutely art, even if the piece wasn't intended as it at all. So there's even more weird gray area in the middle when you start getting into that kind of thing. Like even if the original intention wasn't to be art, it can still be. I think you hit that same kind of thing too the older a piece starts getting, because you start getting into some of those like really antique pieces and it's like, okay, that's like a wooden duck with wheels that a little kid pulls on a string. Like clearly that's a toy, but that's a fucking cool piece of art at the same time.
But that's where like the term commercial art lives, right? So like we're talking Warhol and before that, where the concept like art for the purpose of selling a product or selling the piece itself is like you're now sending art to the masses instead of to the high-end buyer who's buying the giant painting that goes on their wall in their home or whatever. And so like the Monster in My Pocket is that, right? It's commercial art. You have the people who sculpted those and sculpted Barbies and sculpted GI Joe figures, like I doubt there's anyone who has designed those toys who doesn't consider themselves an artist, because like why else would you be doing it?
Right? Absolutely.
So
I'm gonna cut in for a quick second because we have two new joiners here, so I just want them to get a chance to kind of introduce themselves and also kind of get a little bit of a lick in as well.
Hello.
Hey, I guess I'll start. Can you guys hear me?
You bet. Yeah, man.
Hell yeah. So I'm Cody at Downer Energy. Just here, I was popping in. Just this is a cool discussion. Like as a whole, like I went to design school. I'm a software engineer by trade, and so this kind of the design space as a whole, I think, is really like tiptoes on that edge of like art versus functionality versus like actually like a functional thing, right? Like a toy being a functional unit of like entertainment, right? And so it's just an interesting discussion as a whole. I mean, I think for a lot of people, I think a lot of what I see in like the art toy like realm is like people who are almost like especially in the horror aspect of it, right? There's a lot of like horror movie crossover stuff, right? And a lot of that, like the practical effects sort of vibe from that comes through in a lot of these things. And I think those to me are like I think a really interesting expression of like it's a toy in that it's like it's like a tiny unit of like entertainment, or like a tiny statuette that just sits there. But yeah, I think the artistry really comes into when people are actually like what they apply to it as a whole. And I know, like for me, like, you know, just like working on stuff like that, right? There's like actual intent in the piece itself, right? Like what's actually going on. And that's the part that I think just makes it art, as long as there's intent, right? But that's just me. That's my little bit here. I'm just here for the vibes.
And hopefully you guys can hear me too. But I'm John, Death and Strawberries, and this whole thing is like I went to school for illustration, and so that has always been my jam, is this like commercial type of art, and the appreciation of the design and the packaging, all of those little maybe things that people normally don't notice, you know, that I learned to appreciate. And I feel like this is, you know, this group here is a bunch of folks that are like-minded, kind of getting that same mindset of, you know, maybe we obsess over some silly details here and there, but ultimately it's because we appreciate the work that went into creating the piece. And so, yeah, I got plenty more to say, but I'll save it there.
I'm gonna sneak in because I think that you touched on something really perfect there, though, is why does it matter or does it? And personally for me, like why it matters is right there, is that there's certain people that do notice these little intricacies or these little details, and it means something to them. And for you to purposely put that down, you're actually putting down like what they've built. At the end of the day, nobody likes to feel embarrassed. Nobody likes to feel ashamed. And so like that's why it becomes important, in my opinion, is that at the end of the day, I want to consider all toys art. But at the end of the day, I need to make sure that the guy who considers his art not a toy, well, what's wrong with the term toy now? Because then at the same time, just like I'm afraid of stepping on the fact of like you're making art, and I can respect that. You have to understand that like a toy means a lot to me. And so then I feel like that's where it kind of becomes really important, is because in this community, we all love respect. And one of the things we've probably all enjoyed the most about the community is how much respect there's been amongst everybody. And so I think it becomes important because the last thing you want to do is be laughing at the guy beside you who's up here in the trenches with you, totally oblivious like that you're even offending him.
Yeah.
But then I wonder, is that something that's actually unique per individual based on their own morals and values, or does that actually become something you think that is actually represented by the community, that they do try and actually share that whole territory of art and toy to respect all fields?
So you're saying is the term art toy an inclusive term, and trying to bring both toy and art together intentionally to make a more inclusive community?
I'd say that'd be a great point. I would almost say, if we're going to sit and discuss whether or not it matters if it's art or toy, I'd almost say, well, does it just matter to some people, or should it actually matter to the whole scene?
Yeah.
Well, here's a question off of that. I don't think have any of you ever seen or heard of somebody making stuff on the level that like we make stuff, like the independently made stuff, just refer to it as a toy? Because I can't think of that. Like, has anybody made it with no display intention, no artistic intention, just as a thing for kids to play with?
This is what I love. I love that you brought this up, because there's an artist in the community that I actually admire. I consider him an artist. He actually does murals outside of toys before he even touched toys. And his response to the question the one day was, mine will always be toys. I didn't include it because in my brain I was kind of like, how do you really include a personalization of somebody saying mine will always be toys? But you've kind of just brought us there. There's artists in the community that, even though outside of the toy community they're artists, in here, I will always make toys.
It'd be great if we had that person here to speak their point.
Well, I think it's really interesting.
Defend yourself.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of what I see, like as a whole, like we see a lot of like classical, like actual mass produced toys, right? The consumer toys, right? As like having value when they stay in the package. And I think Crumbs, actually, you're an interesting example where I've seen you like play with the toys like on camera and you like vibe with it. And I think that's awesome. And I just imagine, like, for me, like if I were to purchase like someone's like bootleg with a backer card and everything, like that's living inside of it. Like I even have consumer ones that are like worthless reprints of like 80s stuff that is just still inside of its back, because that's like, it's not meant to be touched from like my perspective. It's a display piece, right? And so I wonder, like, as a whole, in like the community of people here, like who's opening those, who's tearing the bubble, like the blister off of like a nicely designed backer card, right? Yeah, and it's like there's like two people here. Yeah, and that's cool. That's totally cool. It's interesting perspective.
A buddy of mine, because I brought this up because to me, I respect the pieces, and that's why it's important to me to know, like, do you consider this a piece as it is or what? And what was funny is I was like trying to explain to this person how, to me, I'd like to be able to touch them, but if the package doesn't allow, then great. They just rip them open. That's their prerogative. But I guess that would also be another thing, is like, so does it really matter if it's art or if it's a toy? Well, is it going to bother some artist out there if you've literally just ripped it open to play with it?
Yeah, I think that's all up to like that intent.
That's true. I don't. Yeah, and I definitely have a couple pieces on the wall where like you get it. Like I would have to go back through and look at my Instagram to see who it is, but there was like one guy who did the old like Sinclair gasoline sign with the Brontosaurus on it, and it's just like a little plastic Brontosaurus, but then most of the art is caught up in the backing card part of it. And so like a piece like that is gonna stay the way it is, because sometimes you look at it and you go, okay, this, like my favorite one of those ever is that old, like as far as I know, the first joke one that ever caused it, which was that Star Wars The Force action figure, which is just an empty Star Wars blister pack. And like when something's like that, you can kind of see that's meant to stay as a whole.
Back when I used to collect stuff more, I had to downsize a lot over the years, but and that was just, this is like before art toys were a thing. And I would, if there were things where I like the packages, like I have some stuff on my wall now and some stuff is loose, but I would, if I had something I wasn't sure I wanted to like actually open, what I would usually do was I would look at the blister on the card and I would kind of figure out like where I could hinge it, and I would take an X-Acto and cut around the blister and make a flap so I could pull the thing out and fuck with it. And then if I wanted to, I could put it back in and put it in the thing and stick it on the wall or whatever. So I had the option where I didn't like, completely desecrate the packaging. But I could like subtly open it without really being able to tell. And it would essentially let me put it back in the package if I wanted to. They've made that harder with packaging for mass-produced figures in the last 10 or 15 years, with like, there's like blisters on blisters inside the outer blister, and there's like cards around them, and it's really like a puzzle to open the thing, and everything's like zip tied onto the card. And I know that's like all anti-theft stuff, but it's just interesting how it's like changed a little bit. And so for things like that, I would have, if I had like bought some art toys or whatever, like I'll inevitably open things. There's only so long I can have it in the package, because otherwise, like, I just paid for a plastic blister, so like, because I have stuff that I still haven't opened yet that I will eventually, and I'll do the same thing if it's like, obviously not the Force one, because there's nothing in there, but I have to kind of decide on like a piece by piece basis, like, is this a thing I want to take out and play with, or is it just like a showpiece, like Cody had said, right? And it's okay that they can be both or one or the other, but it's like that's really the owner of the art. You know, you purchase the art from whoever, the artist, a retailer, and then it now has a personal meaning to you, and you know it becomes disconnected from like what the artist's intention was, because now it's like part of your world and part of your collection. But that's just my thought on it.
I was gonna say too, like the it depends on your definition of toy, right? And maybe that's not the case with people buying you know, these kind of resin figures and things like that. But like I don't work in the creative field, so like people that I work with are like, you know, the toy is like that's like you're playing with a toy, like some kids thing or whatever, you know, and it, they don't quite grasp the the artistic nature of it like I do. And so, you know, maybe it's just kind of how you view that. But I think, like I said, most of the folks that I've come across in this community kind of look at it the way we're talking about, is it's more of an object to appreciate all the detail that went into it, the work that went into it. It's handcrafted, you know, those type of things that are like, it's a unique kind of object, which to me leans more towards art. And it kind of reminds me of like I always had this in art school, was like illustration versus fine art, right? And it's like, how do you know the difference? When you look at someone like a Howard Pyle has these amazing paintings. If you saw that on the wall in a museum, you'd be like, oh, it's a piece of art. But you know, in his day, that was just an illustration or whatever. Like it was a paid job, and he just did that. So yeah, I think it's just kind of your viewpoint.
Aaron, you mentioned something as you were making your point that like when the whole art toy thing happened or started, which made me think like when did this start? Like when did the creation, the hand, and I think another point that you made, and you too as well, John, is like these are objects made by individuals, not or made and produced by individuals. They aren't things that are you know, end up on a shelf at a store from a major manufacturer overseas, kind of thing. It seems, and I don't know much about the history of the things that we do, other than I guess it could go all the way back to the arts and crafts movement. This is just a continuation of that. But I guess when individuals started making toys of their own, these expressions of toys they had when they were kids, perhaps that was a moment where, as individuals are expressing our own interests through objects we made, perhaps that is another kind of form of art. Not only for the craftsmanship in it, but for the resulting object of attraction by others. You know, is it art if no one else appreciates it? Maybe. Or, you know, it's only art if it is appreciated by someone or criticized by someone else. I think art is not a, you know, is something to be criticized and appreciated altogether.
I think an interesting aspect of like the individualist portion of this, where it's like individuals actually making and producing these, like design to production is controlled by like one person the whole time, is the contrast of that between like what I would have formerly thought of as like art toys, which were like maybe in like 2010s, early 2010s, was the like the blind boxes from like Urban Outfitters, the Tokidoki, the Kid Robot things, when those started getting like super popular. And like those were cool because they were like, oh, they're art toys and they're like desk toys, but they're still just like, they're just mass produced with like, you just don't know what you're buying, and they're cheap enough to not care, right? So it's like it didn't matter, but it's like it's really interesting how like that removing that from that aspect of like the mass production and putting it into like individuals on Instagram, like just like pumping out resin casts as like I think it adds not like legitimacy, because I feel like that delegitimizes the other one, but it adds like an authenticity to it that I think is important, that I think gets it closer to art, no matter what you're doing, like if you intend it to be a toy or not, right?
I think the vinyl toys thing came first, and then I don't know his real name. Sucklord is like, I think the editor of like the resin toy thing, where he did all the like knockoffs and like social commentary stuff, and then it kind of bloomed from there. I haven't watched that Master Casters documentary, but I know he's like in that, and that guy interviews a bunch of other people that I guess have been around the scene for a long time. I don't know what he's doing now, Sucklord, but
he's been playing with a bunch of NFTs and stuff, but it even predates, if you think about it, because like you've got Lily Letty, that basically they were making Kenner bootlegs.
Yeah.
Well, that nowadays they consider them like the variant of vintage, because there's dudes that were collecting vintage figures and started going, why does this look a little bit different than my other boba? And all of a sudden they discovered that there's actually a whole series of bootlegging companies that are actually doing like better versions of than the Kenner toys. So it's like, I would even almost consider when you start seeing those guys, or, you know, I was just looking at a page today where it was literally all the green, I want to say the June does, but basically for St. Patrick's Day, they have like all the green figures, and essentially like it's the same with Mims. Every now and then you'll rub off like the silver or like the paint that's on there to see what's under it, because you kind of want to see what's been bootlegged. And I think it's kind of interesting when you start talking about the artistry behind it, you suddenly start seeing like, what's the difference then if you've got dudes like Barry Bobo was talking last week in their garages, deciding that they're going to pump out some bootlegs and staple it onto some hand-drawn backers and stuff that they have laying around. Does that suddenly become art because it was from the garage? Like, I would even almost wonder, like moving forward, is there maybe a way that we can almost kind of try and like classify art and classify toys, so we can almost even kind of see what we're meaning as we're moving forward? Like, what?
Good luck.
Right? For me, what I always go with is, does it use or purposely omit the principles or elements of design? At the end of the day, if I'm looking at a painting and it's supposed to be a composition, I'm looking at it going, okay, did he intentionally use or omit them? Because at the end of the day, like, we assume that it's supposed to have them or not. Abstract, of course, takes us to a whole new place.
right, I was just like Jackson Pollock, but
Yeah, like I'm a big Diebenkorn fan. Like I'm a big, I really like abstract art. I think I honestly like pushing the boundary of like the consideration of art is like where, like to me, that's like the purest form of like the intent in it, which is what like makes it art to me. Like I went to art school as well, and like I just have like such a loose definition of art from that, because I had one bad art history teacher, and it just put me off of like the entire like classification of anything. Anything. I honestly believe anything that somebody is that is produced, I think just instantaneously becomes art, whether they like it or not. And artists be damned, right? Like
that's for sure. Even like you'd said, you do software engineering, like, and people think of that as like this technical, oh, you're like nuts and bolts computer or silicon code. But it's like that's very much like an expression of like the individuals like problem solving, how they approach, you know, this larger project. I'm just taking like solo developers just to keep it like contained, right? And that's a very creative thing, and I'm interested in that. I like dabble with code. I'm like reading about Node.js at the moment, but so like I think there's a lot of validity in what you're saying, that really art is all around us. It's in everything we do, and it's you know, whether it's like the chair you're sitting on or the headphones you're wearing, like somebody designed that. It doesn't matter if they call themselves an artist, like there's still a creative endeavor there to make that thing a reality. So art is definitely like omnipresent in our lives. And it is hard to quantify for that reason, because it touches literally everything.
There's two things. Scott Sachi actually brought in toys are the logical conclusion of the data's treatment to everyday objects as art. I would totally
true.
I was also talking to Epoxy Crusader the other day, and he said something fantastic where he said toys are both art and anti-art. And instantly I was just like, hot damn, they do absolutely question everything about what we know as being art. Because we're sitting here talking about it right now and wondering, is it art? So it was kind of dope to be like, you know what? The original sculpt that some guy made and had to put the time and effort into, absolutely art. But then the moment that you turn it into a toy and you put it out into the market and people are willing and able to make whatever decision they want for it, it does almost become anti-art when you have people like us sitting there trying to argue it's art.
Well, if you think of like the traditional view of art, right? Like our parents, our grandparents, art is a thing that like is hoity-toity, and you look at it, you don't touch it. Like that's art. Just that's on the wall. Just that's
I
in a
love
museum.
my Thomas Kincaid paintings.
Yes, yeah.
Or even I would say like consider Hummel's Treasured Memories resin.
Yeah, same thing.
It's like somewhere down the line, like we've just progressed, and they would absolutely look at theirs. Like I remember my dad was a goldsmith, and they would carry those treasured memories in a jewelry store, and yet I don't know what the biggest difference becomes. Is it the medium?
I would say no difference.
I think
it's the
when you
same.
start
It's just the
pointing at, like,
perception.
the treasure. Oops, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think there's definitely a dividing line where when it's money first, that eradicates a lot of what makes it art. When it's created like for the express purpose of being put into a market segment, like there's a reason that you say the word Funko and half the people in any given toy group like shudder in revulsion. And like the precious memories and that kind of thing are the same sort of thing, where it's like they were like, okay, what's going to be vaguely agreeable to a very large cross section of people, and we can produce a whole lot of it quickly.
So that is actually, I'm designing with that intent, though it may not be the outcome. And also coming from art school, I'm reluctant to even to call it design, because I know design also has its own arguments for what is design and versus what is art. But that intention of mass production and the design decisions or the decisions you make in the from the sculpt to the production, or how the original sculpt is influenced or is affected by the choices of production. That is what I'm trying to recreate in my prospect figures. I've typically resisted the kind of association as being an artist in my own work as a user experience designer and graphic designer, because I've always thought of it as design to solve a problem. It is to solve a problem or to help someone else with that design, to better inform people, to ensure people have a successful experience with their digital product. And I think likewise, I am working with that from that perspective in the sculpt of my character, that, or not my character. This is a character I'm creating an action figure for, a character that someone else came up with. And in that way, I think it is not a kind of, as we've been discussing here, it's not an expression of my, it's not a concept of mine. It's someone else's concept. I am, in a way, even though I wasn't, am not commissioned to make this figure. I wanted to kind of go through the endeavor to make it, and to make it as if it were to be mass produced. So I kind of wonder, like, am I a toy maker or an art toy maker or an art maker but I think maybe the consistent thing through that right there is I'm a maker, and I think we are all makers, producers of objects. But then I guess it just comes back to, again, the intent, mass production, or evoking emotion, making a statement, creating something beautiful for other people to appreciate. That's those all seem to be gray lines or very stark lines, depending on what light you shine on it.
So I actually have like a working theory that I've used to like measure the measurables of art, which is a 2-axis system of craftsmanship versus artistry, right? And so like it's all art within that grid, right? But like the idea that you can be just really good at making something and it doesn't even have to be your design is still like in the artistic intent, the craftsmanship that goes into that is part of art, regardless of the other axis, which would be artistry, which is your design itself being like the influencing or the like the driving factor behind it, right? And so that's just I think that relates pretty good to that one. That to me is like I don't see those as two separate parts of like the am I art, am I arting right now, right? Like it's all holistically those, right?
Yeah, I definitely think about that when I'm working on stuff. I spend a lot more time refining my craftsmanship than I think I do creating art, right? Like I'll iterate on a mold 6 times before I'm like, okay, this is good enough, right? Or like a piece or whatever. Because it's not just creating the things, it's like part of the satisfaction for me is refining the process. And that's very, very strongly leans into what you're saying about the craftsmanship.
I think it's a big part of like technical arts as well, is like a lot of people like to be able to like, so it's music, I think, is a very easy one to see this in as well, right? So you have like punk, like 3 chords and like a soda can that has a guitar cable strapped to it, right? Like equals music, versus like you can have someone who's just an absolute, maestro of whatever thing that they're doing, like a complete savant at whatever instrument that they're doing, and it's incredible. But there's the emotional differences, like is the only like there's punk would be like 0-0 on like the, or like sorry, like 1-0 on the like 1 for artistry, 0 for craftsmanship, while like the classical would be the exact inverse of that, right? Where it's like yeah, like a Kenny G, right? Kenny G would be like a 1 of so fully into like craftsmanship, right? But like 0 on artistry because it's typically classic. I mean, like there's emotion in that, but you're playing somebody else's work entirely, right? That's working.
Oh, so is artistry on your scale a scale of originality?
I don't know if originality, more so like authenticity, I think is usually where I would put that, is your authentic like driving factor in this is that like you have a need to produce it, right? Like the drive to create art is the impetus for the piece, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to like if you're just like
I think that's a pretty good dividing line.
yeah, so like if you're a classical musician of some sort, like there's nothing not artistry about what you're doing, but the artistic intent of what you're doing is to reproduce a piece that somebody else has already designed as faithfully as possible, or like that interpretation to be as like as good as possible, which is like that's the technical art, the craftsmanship portion of it.
Yeah, we see that in movies and video games. Literally the title technical artist, right? Where they're refining the process to try to like, help the creatives like be the most efficient they can be in the production of their creative works.
Yep.
I was gonna say too, it's kind of an interesting when you brought up the money thing there, Shane. Like if you're trying to make money off of a piece, like I would hazard to say like most of us are influenced by those type of objects, those kind of toys that we grew up with, where somebody was doing that, but they took the extra time to add in beautiful sculpting or extra paint details, the card back stuff, like like the GI Joe adding in the file card type of thing. Like they didn't have to do all that to sell plastic. But somebody did, and that's what we appreciated about, or at least that's what I appreciated about it and inspired me.
Yeah.
I would even say Todd McFarlane's probably like the perfect example. I mean, the guy like literally sold his soul to Marvel, but yet you look at the back of the Spider-Man comics and they're commenting on how he was like the first one to really have Spider-Man like bending all weird ways and arms going between his legs and everything and doing spins and flips.
Mm-hmm.
And he also does sculpts and did Spawn. And at the end of the day, like he's done sculpts for hockey figures, he's done sculpts for like everything. So he's a full-on commercial artist that's been doing it all to get paid. But he's probably one of like the most representational.
I don't know that you would say that though. Like, there's definitely a time period where McFarlane was, being approached to make these big industry name things, but like Spawn was his. The stuff he did with the classic movie monsters, I'm sure he did because he loved it. The Clive Barker stuff he did because if Clive Barker wants to do something with you, you fucking do it. But I think a lot of that was a labor of love. I think he just happened to be one of those few people who got really damn successful at it.
So I don't know, and we can talk about it another time, but Spawn is basically all about his contract with Marvel. Like Marvel is Malbolgia. That's why you have the big giant M on everything. That's why he sold his soul to get what he wanted. He can never obtain it because it's not his. It's not his to get. It's Marvel's. Marvel's characters.
So what you're saying is that Todd McFarlane's most successful property was the thing he created, complaining about how shitty his conditions were.
It's basically
so his most personal possible thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's genius. I never thought of that. That's genius.
I mean,
Art
who wouldn't
is
want to
pain.
be super successful while shitting on a major property? Honestly.
So, if you guys don't mind, because I think we could we all love this topic, I think, but if we could kind of move to the next one, would you guys say we could all kind of agree that all toys are a form of art?
I'm +1 on that.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
They can definitely be appreciated that way.
I would need to see an example of a toy someone considers is not artistic in any way at all.
Okay, so I'm going to go there because the first toy ever, if you Google it, is a stick. So the reality is, if you guys watch Ren and Stimpy, one of the biggest gags in there is
It's log, bro.
Yeah.
log.
Everyone wants a log.
Toy.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a log. And then when does log get better? When it gets hair. When log now has hair.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, even they kind of joke that like the classic toy that every kid's going to want is a stick out in the yard to play with.
The stick provokes emotion, therefore it is art.
But at what point does a stick in some way? I'm sure somebody somewhere out there has taken a piece of driftwood and friggin' oiled it down and set it up in their house being like art now.
You don't even need to oil it for it to be art.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go.
I think honestly,
intention's got to be in there too.
I don't think you need intention. I think it's the observance.
Intention, emotional response.
I think the observance itself, it's Heisenberg uncertainty, right? Like as soon as you observe it, you are the observer of it. It has become processed. You cannot process the observance of these objects without it actually hitting your consciousness, right? Therefore, you're interpreting it. Therefore, it has to be art, right? Like
You guys both hit something, in my opinion, really dope. Spiffy Worm by San BC. San BC, when I even asked her about it, she's like, I wouldn't be so pretentious as to say I'm an artist. I made a worm figure. The materials are too fragile for it to actually be a toy, but I know you love toys, so I made sure that I was paying homage to what a toy would have. And I gave him a flag so that way you could technically play with him in some manner. And my brain was just blown because it was like, you literally just like omitted the fact you're an artist. You've said the intent was literally just to celebrate toys, but you also acknowledge that this thing that is to celebrate toys cannot function as a toy. You know,
Go buy model trains all the time.
so I think that was like, in my opinion, I think you guys basically both link into that type of idea, because somebody can definitely say, I made art, and you can get it and say, this isn't art, it's just a toy. And the inverse can totally happen, where it was created with the intent for it to be a toy, but then you observed it as art.
I mean, mid-on-card collectors, they're not collecting toys, they're collecting art. Because, like, they're not opening it. Like, you can play with the box, but, like, you know,
Oh, go ahead.
that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think the concept of like death of the author is like important here, where like all art ceases to be the creator's intent when it receives a viewer, right? It becomes solely the interpretation, everything, right? So the interpretations, the intent that the artist had putting into it, die at point of observance, right? You can take that into account in your interpretation and how it goes, but the reality of it is you're observing and you're getting that art personally, individually. Everybody does, right? And that's the therefore all is art. Art is all. There is no escape.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier about, like, once the piece leaves the artist's hands or whatever, and it's received by the buyer or the recipient, then the recipient is the sole definer of what that piece means to them, right? And like the artist can say, oh, I meant this, I meant that. Doesn't matter. Like, it's just how the viewer interprets that. An example, a friend of mine loves David Lynch. I could take or leave him. But he's like, oh, he's such a genius, and he doesn't explain his movies and blah, blah, blah. And like, they're up for you to determine. I'm like, there's a lot to unpack, but I'm just like, okay, whatever. I'll try to understand it. I probably won't. And I'll just be like, this didn't make any sense. It has no meaning to me. Like, it's art. He like had an intention. He just didn't disclose what that is. I'm too dull to like understand what that is. And so to me, the message is lost, right? Or I try to manufacture my own message out of what I see. But like what Lynch intends and what I perceive are completely separate entities. So I agree with what you're saying, basically.
I've got to bounce, guys. This was great. I'm gonna have to rewatch from the beginning to pick up on some of the other concepts that were discussed here. But good seeing you guys.
Yeah.
Later.
Yeah.
All right.
I have to comment on that. We had there was I hope he's not watching, but there was a guy in art school, and he used to every piece of work he'd have these like weird like he'd just make weird scratches and like random designs in there, and it was like we called it like creatorbation, or it's just like randomness. And and I think it was an attempt to kind of make it look a little bit more arty or whatever, like hey, I'm making a statement with this stuff, I'm being an artist. And to me it never resonated, but I mean that it works for people. So like you say, like it's however you interpret it, I think is the most important piece of that aspect, and it's not necessarily what the artist intends, it's what people get out of it.
I'd say what's most important about that too is in my opinion, if it's important to you that there was intent, don't make your customers guess or your observer guess. At the end of the day, yes, they're gonna have their own interpretation and they're gonna try and make up their own story for it. But the reality is, and especially in art and toy, is the less room, unless the intention is to give that imagination. If you're making something like a toy, unfortunately, we've already talked about, there's a craftsmanship level in there now. And so for it to actually function from what our expectation is from a toy, we kind of expect that level of craftsmanship. And so I would even almost kind of say that you enter into this weird territory where it's like, well, I'm making art, so it looks like the item is representing that item. And it's like, well, we're expecting it to function.
Like, did it succeed at that representation?
Yeah. And
it's interesting. Yeah, like you get into that with like color field abstract paintings, right? Like so if you're just painting squares, right, and everyone goes, oh well, I could just do that, and it's like, well, one, you didn't, right? Like, two, are you like, is the intent of the squares to be squares, or is the intent of the squares to make you wonder what the squares are and like feel what that, right? And like, so you get into like a big interpretive circle on like what it is. So like, it's hard when you're dealing with like representative items, like a figure, right? Like, I think that's really difficult because you have like recognizable things that they should be if you
So
intend them to
flashing.
be that.
Flashing,
Flashing, right?
great
Like,
one for me, because when you look at an old school bootleg, gonna see some fucking flashing.
Yeah.
Happy paint jobs, gonna be there. Mwah. But if I don't know that's your intent when you're selling me the piece and you're selling it for like $80, $90, and I'm going,
looks goofy.
I might, yeah. And then the issue is that unfortunately, imagination can spread weird, right? Because all of a sudden you get these people in the community that they're going, as if so and so is selling that for that price.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at them going, do you not know what a Newsday Blue Stars is? That figure goes for $1,800 if it was a real bootleg.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're kind of like, oh. And especially if that artist is a Mexican artist and you're looking at exactly where that figure came from and you're like, yeah, okay, they're paying homage to the bootlegs from that.
Suddenly it's legitimized at seemingly out of nowhere. It has become legitimized. Yep.
And in my opinion, it's one of those things where it's like, just give me that intent, man. Because if my imagination runs wild and other people's imaginations run wild and all of a sudden people start kind of like trying to guess what it is, it takes 10 times more the effort to try and talk up what it actually is.
It's interesting because like
that's why most of my stuff has some kind of story type thing attached to it, because I want to push people. Like, I know what it is when I made it. I know the little fiction that went in my head with that particular character, so I like to hand that to people with whatever the piece is.
I'm like in a position. I was thinking about it today before any of this stuff came up. That like I was like working on, trying to figure out what I'm doing as usual, and I was like, do I need to have a story? Because like I'm basically just designing figures in a vacuum, right? Like they pay homage to Masters of the Universe and other stuff, but like there are no like characters or stories that are defined. Like I guess it's a thing where I'm like, I'm making these things to like my craftsmanship bar that have the features that I want or whatever and the packaging that I want, and I kind of just present them and I'm like, here they are, and then they're kind of for the recipient to make up the story for themselves, how it integrates into their collection, or what resonates in that piece for them. Because when I like started getting into Masters of the Universe bootlegs and stuff, there was what's it called? It's like Realms of the Underworld or something. It was like the first Mochu bootleg line that had like its own world. And I've seen there have been a lot of, I wouldn't call them copycats because they're all paying homage in their own ways.
Wotu, right?
Yeah.
The Wotu stuff that's super popular. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, there have been a lot of other artists who made these like lines, and they're all kind of a spin on that like Masters of the Universe like name, and their different characters and the world and stuff. It's all this like barbarian future world and whatever. And I've given like no thought to that at all. I'm just like, I'll just let the viewer decide what they want the story to be. And because ultimately to me, it's like my intent is for the recipient to just have fun. Like however you want to do that with this thing that I made, have a blast. Like you want to slap it together and throw it against the wall, go for it. Like you want to put it up with your expensive art on your wall, great. You want to play with it with your kid, great. Like as long as you're having fun with it, then my job is done.
What's interesting? Go ahead, man.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
Totally legit.
I was gonna say that I think the interesting part with toys, especially, is that there's like this built-in understanding that there are like knockoffs and like illegitimate things that just sort of exist in the space. It's like, who hasn't had like a random action figure of like something. It doesn't, you don't even know what it's just a thing. And like that's an experience that is like common and like super common. Like those are just toys, right? You go into any dollar, there's just toys. Yeah. And it's like you just have these things. It's like I don't know what it is. It's just kind of cool. And like, or my parents bought it for me when you're little and you're like, I don't know what he is, but I like him, right? And so like making random things, having like those characters that are like, they're great, right? And it's like but having that like zero context like toy put in your lap is like I think a legitimate experience in this, right? Not that there's any illegitimate ones, but like it's somehow very, very legitimate in like the toy space.
I end up liking to learn it,
especially if it's old.
Yeah.
Trash Toy Studio made these guys, and I didn't know like what they were from. But then you find out that they're actually from like a D&D set, pre-D&D.
Old D&D.
That's sick.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there was like a Riders of the Dragon or something like that. That basically they ripped off a bunch of the D&D figures, and the only one that they didn't alter or change is the magma monster. So for whatever reason, the magma monsters, lava monsters, the same in both sets. So then to now have a Trash Toy Studio one, too.
They knew a perfect sculpt when they looked at it.
Well, even that kind of shit I find is really interesting.
I was gonna say too, a lot of the allure for me anyway is like we have the chance now, like I can buy some things that never existed then, but play along nicely with all the vintage stuff that I have, and that's like super cool. And then we start thinking about all the possibilities of where it could go from there. That's why I'm really excited about this community. It's super cool to see that and get, be involved in that.
I touched on the stories really quickly too. Sorry, because that one's gonna eat me. Aaron, when or Nostalgia, when you mentioned that, I find it can make or break a toy. Because the reality is that Trash Toy Studios, it fits into the lore of his toy. Vomiting Droids fits into the lore of his toy. But I feel that other times somebody is telling me what that item has to be. So recently I saw somebody raised a toy that it's like its sole purpose is to destroy other toys. Well, the issue is that I love toys, so that guy's not coming to my house. That sounds ridiculous, but I build my own story for my toys. So instantly you're like, fuck that guy.
I know what you're talking about. So
I'm not bringing that dude in my house to destroy my other toys. So personally, a story can totally actually ruin a character for you too. Somebody one day was reading out stats to me. They were like, dude, I've got this figure. I was stoked on it. But they started using language that didn't work for me. It was very military language of like AK-47 assault. And you're like, I'm lost now because this isn't like my diction. So now they told me like the world this thing exists in, and I can't put myself there.
Yeah.
So I almost say you're almost sometimes if you don't have a comfortable world that you want them to delve into, you're almost safer letting them create the world.
Yeah, I like it too because I also have this like long-term plan where I don't necessarily want to do 5.5 forever. Like I don't want to be the He-Man guy, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about like, my name and like what does it mean? And everyone's got like these like really cool fun names and stuff. And I settled on Nostalgia because to me it was like I'm trying to take things like Jonathan was just saying, I want to bring things from my past and the things that I've enjoyed into the present. But then also because I'm an artist and I'm a creative person, I want to insert my own things into it. And I don't want it to always just be this world. Like I might want to do a 6-inch scale, or I might want to do like Western themed ones, or like cyberpunk stuff. So I don't want to feel pigeonholed into like this. Everything has to fit into this one world I've created. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to explore different universes, and have like different lines be those different expressions. Because then, maybe there's someone who like is really into G.I. Joe, and they'll be like, all those cyberpunk figures are really cool. They'll fit into my like G.I. Joe stuff. And whereas like the He-Man stuff, they're like, that's not really my thing. And then it lets me explore creatively, ideas and worlds and characters, and because then it keeps it fun for me, right? And then because then I want to take that fun I'm having and then give it to everyone else. And like, here, I think these things are cool. Like, I hope you have fun with them too. And that's my whole thing, is like, I just want it all to be fun, and I don't want it to feel trapped in a specific box.
Yeah, I know. Like when I like start making a figure, or when I'm like even doing something, like there's a lot of like, for me, it's interesting because I think I'm on another side of the scale where it's like I just have like an artist intent. I have a story to tell with what I'm doing, but I don't. I mean, I don't produce artist statements for them. I don't send a little slip of paper that tells you what it is, right? Like I'm just like sitting down with clay, and I'm feeling a certain way, and like I'm trying to like express that in like in a tiny aesthetic way, right? And like that's all I'm selling is like the tiny aesthetic portion of it, and like banking on the trust that people have with like the product that I'm like, actually like I'm doing something with it. And like, some people just want the aesthetics of it. That's totally fine. And like, it's not like I'm producing the artist statement for you to buy anyways, right? Like that's what I'm selling it on. But like that I think is like it's just like how you approach them, because like it's kind of funny to me. I didn't even have like action figures and stuff growing up. I'm like too young for like the Kenner stuff as a whole. I was big into Legos, and I was big into computers, right? Like that was pretty much it. And so like I've always liked, for since I've been like, before I was even like, when I was an older teen, it was like the desk toys, like just the little like vinyl Tokidoki things, right? But there's like, to me those are so they're so artificial, right? They're pure artifice, right? They don't mean anything. Usually it's a Supreme logo slapped on a shirt, and you're going like, yeah, this is dope. And like that's what they end up kind of just being, right? And so like the idea that someone can just like take something and like have like an artistic intent, and it's honestly like a shitty skull sculpt with like a poor brain model on the back, right? Like that's it. But like I sat down, I made it, and I wanted to say something with it, and to me it accomplishes it, right? And that's what I'm like, that's what I want to put out there, right? Or in general, I think I see that a lot with some things where it's like, especially the satirical bootlegs, right? The empty blister pack that says Force or stuff like that, right? Like that satire is like that comedy is what is like conveying that story as well. And I think that's my thoughts there.
Well, Scott Suchi chimed in from YouTube. He was even saying like, Masters of the Universe had a TV show, Star Wars had the movie. A lot of us don't have that. So in my opinion, it's got to be one of two things. Either you've got to have a really good story for your character, or you better be a very personable person. Because the reality is that if I can't become friends with you and be like, you're so rad, because that's what happens, right? You become friends with someone, you're like, I got to tell you to everybody. Everybody needs to know about you. So you go and you tell everybody about that person. So one of those two things needs to happen. Either you're hoping that you can click with this person and actually like want to talk them up, or you're hoping that they've produced a story so good that you want to tell it.
Yeah, isn't that that one seeing it like Pendragon, I think it is. It's like they're like currently like factory produced ones that this guy's doing. But they're crazy. They're absolutely like beyond quality that like anyone at home is going to be able to produce. And but there's like a book associated with it, I think it's an ongoing series. I thought that was interesting. It's the first time I've seen that in like this community. I'm relatively new to the community as a whole, but that's the first time I've seen somebody like have a factory made figure with a book and like have things going out. It's pretty cool.
Okay, now I need to know.
Yeah, let me try and find it real
quick.
quick.
No, is it Helium Made? Is it a Pendragon? Because I didn't know Pendragon was putting out a book.
Yeah, it looks like a Pendragon with all the underscores under each one.
Fair. I'll admit I don't
real quick.
follow too much with Pendragon.
I don't either. It's been coming up. It's like they're popular because they're really cool, and so they get like lots of likes from like the when you get past in like Instagram, when you go past your normal feed and you hit the suggested, like his stuff has been bubbling up constantly.
I think that's what kind of bothered me. Is his stuff bubbles up constantly. He does very well. People talk very well about him. But to date, one of my favorite things ever is going to be I sent somebody a couple of toys that I was just like, no, I didn't want them in my house anymore. The artist actually burned my feelings about those figures, so I sent them out to this other individual. And it was such a good feeling to have this person say to me, man, I just got them in there. I went to put the arm in and it snapped trying to get it into the fucking joint. And then he was like, what is the point of making such a rad ass figure if you're not even going to fucking line up the arm? And I was just sitting there kind of like, I had been worried all week because this person's a bigger person. I was worried that they were going to actually say to me like, Crumbs, man, you're an ass. These are all great pieces. You're a dick. And I was worried. I was terrified he's gonna tell me to like calm my tits. When I got that back, it was just like such a nice like the sun broke through the clouds. Angels were like, whoa. And I was kind of like, yeah, you know what? Like, it doesn't matter how big your following is. It doesn't matter how quick you sell out. It doesn't matter. And I'm not ashamed that I grabbed that toy and went, oh, where's the hype? Because at the end of the day, like the reality is this is what comes back with intent. There are going to be some artists out there that you meet them and they are so fantastic that they could hand you something that they've poured their heart and soul into, and it's crap. If you were put on a lie detector test and you were actually told, you have to be honest, what's actually the quality of this? And you're like, it's a turd. And the reality is, though, is that you love it. Anybody comes in your house and they're like, dude, what's that piece? And you're like, oh, that's so-and-so. I love that piece. That's the best piece ever. And then you'll have another piece that I promise you, if you're at a lie detector and they're like, is there a flaw? And you're like, no, it's perfect. Somebody comes in your house and they're like, what's that guy doing all the way over there? And you're like, he doesn't deserve to be on the wall. I hate that toy. That has nothing to do with the work at that
I feel bad for you getting stuck on that, man, because the first couple people that I interacted with who are like really successful at the toy thing, like sell out as soon as they put their stuff up and all of that, are Sam Hamer, HH Toys, and then Dead Bird Toys, Jeff. And I interacted with both of them. Like, they know that they don't have to do anything and their stuff will sell out because their pieces have become that popular. But like, I messaged them, I got nice responses back immediately. We did trades for stuff immediately. So my initial interaction with like the big wigs in the toy setup was all super positive. And I think it's really kind of kept me in it since.
What's weird though is I don't get along with the middle. I get along with the other two sides. I get along very well with some of the guys that are on the other side. I don't know what it is, man. It's like Rainbow Yawn and I chat. I don't know if that's okay. Like, he came and did the Q&A, and that wasn't me being like, can you please come do the Q&A? He cares about the community. Like, I'll be honest, that was probably one of the dopest things in the entire world is you have this guy who he's got like 16,000 followers, and he reaches out to you and he says, hey, I'd like to do a Q&A with you because there's certain questions I don't feel like I get to answer my live. And I'd also like to hopefully bring some of my following over to your page so they can see all the indie guys. Because I'd really like some of the indie guys to get some of my following. And you're sitting there being like,
that's dope.
God damn, you know? And I'm not going to name any names, but there was a different artist that was a little bit higher up that when all of a sudden it came time to do anything with the footage, I'm basically like PTSD because he basically let me know, like, no, this is the me show. And so suddenly you're kind of like, okay. So it's definitely a lot of spectrums, man. And
I'm gonna go work on a different
as a
thing.
creative, I'm gonna put it out there, as creatives, you guys get totally different treatment. Like, I've got homies now at this point that at the end of the day, they're like, Crumbs, you're a nice guy in the community. You've never done me wrong. I'm gonna help you out. I sent you a little extra thing. And so I totally understand that, like, yes, I do absolutely have some homies that have sent some extra stuff with the packages. There's definitely other sides of it though, too, where like you're always gonna have those people that are like, well, why aren't you buying from me? Or wondering all that side of the rough side of it. The toy community is tough to navigate, man. It's a very tough thing to navigate.
It's hard because you're trying to produce something that like has some amount of commercial appeal, something that people are going to buy at like face value from an image, but also be authentic. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
You've been trained to believe that success comes in selling.
Yeah.
Probably like the hardest, worst thing too is that you're literally like, you can't always compete with everybody else. And the reality is nobody's really talking about their drops. So if so-and-so is like a grail item and he never does drops, but every now and then is like, oh, I got 3. Guess where everybody's impulse purchase went that week?
Yep.
It went there. And the issue is that there are certain people that they don't care.
Yeah.
They do not care that you've been advertising for a month, that you have a drop on Friday. They don't care.
Yep.
They're just gonna, and what's weird about it is, I'm sure you guys notice it. There's people who come into the community and they participate in the community, and there's people that come in and they're like, check it out, and then they're gone again. Hope everybody's good. Boom.
I wonder if it's just down to like, what it's really down to like what they are intending to do with like that account and that community, like, like interaction, right? Like I participate. I like everyone's stuff. I like love looking through people's work. I go through, like, anytime I see a new profile, I go through and I look for stuff that I think is cool, and I'm just like vibing on it, right? Like it's just cool stuff that I can just look at, right? And like, I buy things on occasion at this point, and like it's just feeding back into the community, and like, at this point, like selling to me is just like just trying to get my pieces into other people's hands, and like there has to be some economy around that, right? I can't, material isn't free, right? And so like I basically sell it almost at cost so I can buy more material so I can keep doing it with little churn on my end, right? So I'm not just pouring money into it, right? And I know there's a lot of people that do the same thing. I see some of the prices on some of the stuff is crazy that people sell it at. And I'm like, you're like at material cost, right?
And the issue is like hard profit versus soft profit. So the reality is like, it's very easy for you to do a trade with somebody and be able to be like, yeah, you know what? I wanted that item anyways. Like, I'm down to do a trade, and you accept that as like a soft profit.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, when you actually sell to somebody, you're selling it for the 50, 40, whatever it is that it's priced at. And so the reality is that, again, you start noticing the weird differences.
Yep.
Some homies that will know, like, unfortunately, they know you do unboxings, so that can become uncomfortable. Like, I had somebody the other day that was like, oh, I loaded it down with freebies for you. And you're like, I don't feel comfortable about that. That actually makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Get your intention. So, okay. But then you get the other people that you can almost tell, like, they have no idea who the fuck you are. And that's fine. Like, I'm not anybody, but they don't realize that you're about to put it right in front of everybody. That's more what I mean. It doesn't matter who the fuck I am, but they have no idea that you're literally about to be like, I'm recording this and I'm going to show everybody what you just sent me. And because they don't know that that's what you do with their item, you do get sometimes those items that it goes through QC, because the reality is that if Dollar Slice ordered one and Rainbow Slice ordered one, or Rainbow Yawn ordered one, and Killer Bootlegs ordered one, well, who's really getting the lemon out of the 30?
Yeah.
And so the issue is that when you're friends with the makers, it almost creates this thing where it's like you need to show the other makers that you're on that level. You don't want to give another maker something that's worse than what you'd make. You want to give them the top of what you'd make. And so even as another consumer, like, you do notice that, like, sometimes the artists get way nicer or different things. And it's not everybody, but it just happens sometimes. And the reality is that, again, it probably is going to happen in other places. If I'm really, 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 really good buddies with One Trick Pony or Pocket Toy Co. or something, like, I'm sure there's been the odd time that they've maybe put that extra time in. I can pinpoint it. Titty Bean Toys. At the end of the day, the guy needed to make a black figure with white 50-50 limbs. He had no idea how to do it. I didn't realize that his mold was one of the types that lay like this, and you've got to pass it through each fucking section. So he's telling me that he's going to plug it with all these different things, and I have no idea what the heck he's talking about. And finally, like, it's like the fourth one, he's like, yeah. And you're like, I am so sorry. I just did that to you.
I didn't want to take that from you.
And at the end of the day, though, like, he wanted that win because he was like, I'm making this for the homie. So I do understand that, like, just like how sometimes the artists get different treatments. Like, I've made friends in the community that I don't know that maybe Titty would do that for everybody. I don't know. But I do kind of feel that for him, it was kind of like, nah, this is for a homie. I better make sure that, like, it's tight.
That's one of the things too that attracts me. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just very briefly going to say, I will say that I did a trade with Titty Beans, and that fucker hooked me up. Like, to the point where I'm like, okay, shit, now I have to pay this forward to him at some point in the future, because, like, I got way more than I just sent you.
But that's the cool thing, it's kind of like it attracted me to this group is like everybody's pushing each other a little bit. Like, it's kind of a fun kind of camaraderie thing. And like, I was messaging Crumbs earlier, but like, I haven't had that since art school. And it's like, it's really exhilarating. Like, that's super cool. So it's not necessarily a bad thing,
I think pushing to stoke all of your homies is like actually a good thing at the end of the day. I think this is what drives, like, when I've played music, it's like that's what drives people to like do things that are interesting, is like you're trying to get everyone on board with what you're doing, right? And like everyone's seen it, everyone's heard it, everyone's here in the community, but so you have to be the one who's pushing it and doing something that's slightly more, quality, and showing people something that's like higher quality, right? And it's like you don't have to. Honestly, I don't think you have to. I think if you're trying to like push the envelope of of your position in the community, that's something that you definitely can do. But then there's also people like was extraterrestrial etc toys. I bought a super squatch from them the other day. That they made like 3 of them. It was like 2 in the morning, and I was like up all insomniatic, and they were just pulling them. And he was like, I don't really like this one, so you can have it if you want. I'll still do the normal order. And he went through like 3 of them until he's like, this is the color that I want, and this is the color that I'm going to send you. I thought that was crazy. I would like, not that I would think that if you're not happy with it, you should give it out, but like doing 3 pulls of like one thing just to like get the color right. I've never talked to him before. I just mentioned I was talking to him about the color on it, and he offered me one, and it was super cool. Like that stuff's super cool. Just rambling at this point.
I
That
think
guy does a really cool work too.
Yeah.
I think as much as it's been mentioned of the camaraderie and stuff, what I really hope with these discussions is that I do feel like there is still a lot of like everybody trying to play nice in the sandbox, which doesn't really work awesome when, of course, like there's varying skill levels, there's only so many customers, there's only so much money to go around, right? At the end of the day. And of course, I feel that the more that everybody's trying to play nice in the sandbox and never saying anything, the more that you can almost tell like the pot's boiling, like the lid starts fucking shaking on top, right? And I personally noticed that there's about 2 different types of mentalities that are currently in the toy scene. The people that have basically been boiling in the pot for so long that they're actually ready to fucking pop the lid off. And the people kind of boiling, but they're also ready to kind of say, okay, well, how do we make this shit all better? At the end of the day, yeah, I get it, man. You're kind of ticked off that new guys coming in the scene isn't putting in the same effort into getting the same quality of work, is charging a price that you don't necessarily agree with. How do we make sure he's making better toys? Instead of actually like shitting on this guy or getting angry at the fact that he's stealing customers, blah, 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 how do we just make sure he's making better toys? Because isn't that all that we all actually want? Don't we actually just want it that everybody's making the best damn thing they can make? And so I'm hoping that as much as you all want to have this like camaraderie and being able to like get along, the end of the day, the soft vinyl community, they tend their garden. And they've even noticed that not every Instagram community or TikTok community really tends their gardens. And of course, we know tend your garden, like weeds start growing and stuff. And like you don't want to gatekeep, but at the end of the day, you do want to almost kind of let certain people sit at their own table and eat. And I'm almost kind of hoping that the more like transparencies that we get about certain things, that maybe like I said, like there's going to be certain things where people kind of sit there and go, shit, I've done that, or oh damn, I hope I haven't done that, or oh crap, I'm guilty of that. And all of a sudden, like instead of it being that people are actually quietly getting angry about shit happening in the scene, they're actually kind of talking about some of the things happening in the scene.
I think a big one here is that organically, like from sales, you'll see people drop off, right? People who are in it to like just like start slinging plastic and like getting money real quick and like validating themselves as an artist of like without actually putting in like any time will just fall off over time. They won't stay because there's no validation coming in, right? And so that's like that in these small artist communities tends to happen. It'll you churn through these people. But I also think as a community we should do I think more work off Instagram. I think something like a Discord, something that's like where people can actually congregate, like actually talk, is like a big one.
So there's a lot of them. Yo-Yo Dine has one. Gula Gaba's
really
his own little crew of them.
Yeah, I'm on a meet your maker Discord with a bunch of guys from Instagram.
So is it like, so the ones that exist, are they just like individual artists that are cultivating these? Because I think to me, like it needs to be like artist independent. Like it's just got to be soft vinyl.
It was like
Discord.
the one that I'm in started as a like a Secret Santa art swap kind of thing. and then people were just enjoying talking in it, so it just somebody converted the name over at some point and then added some new channels, and it just became a general one.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I don't
the big
remember
thing to me.
who. Mapako Toys maybe might have been the first person starting it, but I'm not sure. So that might be exactly what you're talking about, actually. If
Might
it's
be.
that
It was Yo-Yo
egalitarian, I
Dine.
don't even remember who started it.
It's a Yo-Yo Dine one.
Yo-Yo Dine Toy Division.
That
stuff.
was a Yo-Yo Dine one.
Yeah. And yeah, you know what? Discord's great. The reality is for me that I find with Discord is it's great if you can actually convince people to use it properly. What I've noticed is there's a lot of times that you'll still have people on Instagram being like, who's going on Discord later? And you're like,
Yeah.
it's not really needed. It's great to check in, but that's a clear indication that your community is still very small on Discord. If you're checking with like 4 or 5 dudes, if they're going to be
Who's
on
going to be on the chat later?
yeah, you do kind of need to then explore outward and see what other communities exist out there. And then there's a search function to find public channels that exist out there. And my biggest issue comes down to the fact that it's like, I don't want to be trying to monetize off of anybody or doing anything like that. And there's only so much information you can really share before people feel like you're kind of oversharing information. So for me personally, as somebody who's not a creative, I just don't want to be a part of one of the big creative Discords. There's nothing worse, man. I'll be totally honest. There's absolutely nothing worse than being in a chat with artists as they all discuss their pricing. You will never feel comfortable in your entire life as they almost all forget that you're a consumer. And you hear people being like, I pulled the number out of my hat. And you've bought from them. And you're like, that feels awesome. So there's just certain things as a consumer that you just, in order to enjoy the toy community for what it is, you need to be able to take a step back from certain parts of the information and not be privy to. I don't want to hear from somebody being like, oh, I sent this out and I forgot to do that, but like, whatever. And then you're like,
I think one of the most interesting parts of this community is that the consumers and the makers are almost all one, right? Like I don't see a whole lot of people, or I don't have a whole lot of people that I'm following or seeing that are like purely art toy collectors, right? There's like people who collect like actual non-bootleg like consumer figures, right? Like vintage or otherwise. And there are people who are like makers and collectors and like participating in the whole scenario, right? And like so it's weird.
It strays very far from the initial conversation, but part of the issue actually it does become, like you said, there's very few consumers in the actual community. And so we don't really have much say. The reality is you could actually go to one of your closest friends who's another artist and you can say, dude, this guy did this. Like, what should I do about this? You can talk to them about it. They'll agree with you that it was like totally wrong. Fuck that guy. And you'll be like, yeah, I'm not going to follow that person's account anymore because like as if. But you'll still all of a sudden see one day, like as it pops up on your feed, like all your homies who know this guy ripped you off are still liking his shit saying, great work, man. And slowly but surely you're sitting there kind of being like, well, cool. Like at the end of the day, you don't want to cause any waves in the toy community because you're another artist. So you don't really want to have any kind of confrontation with another artist, but who's got the consumers back ever?
Yeah, totally.
And the reality is that you talk to some of the bigger guys and they're like, dude, don't cause waves. Don't cause waves. And you're like, well, what's a wave? Calling somebody out on ripping you off? When does it
all artist communities are at like this size or like just relatively small are insular in through and through. It's hard to penetrate effectively, like actually become a notable figure in it without putting in real work. And then like if you have received the accolades from that, right, you have the social credit, the actual social capital to be like a move maker within that, right? These are the people who sell out instantly, right? But then in general, like nobody wants to be the person who shakes any portion of that because you can't have like these big players without the small players being like a moat around them that represents like the vast majority of their like follower base and their consumer base, right? So it's like everyone has to maintain just eyes forward. Everyone's got to maintain the party line, or it sort of falls apart. And it's interesting because you don't want the community to fall apart, even if there's bad aspects to it, because you want to participate in the community with the art stuff that you like, right?
So
It's the same. This is classic in music. This is classically how music scenes come and go.
So we kind of have it on the conversation, but I feel like we just kind of touched up on it. I feel like the moment that people start kind of labeling it for what it is, it does kind of change things. So like the moment somebody starts trying to tell you like, well, that is art, not a toy. Like they're almost like
Totally.
in that divide. The issue is that we've all just sat here and discussed that a toy is art. Well, oh shit, how do I tell you your art is good or bad? Right?
Oh man, if you gotta learn the
Right.
precious, delicate art of critique.
So that becomes very
Unfortunately, both
difficult.
sides have to understand that one. Otherwise, it
And-
goes
Yeah.
apart. Just falls
But
apart.
that becomes really tough because we've just said like, yeah, if we're in a community where art are toys, the issue is that I've actually had somebody say to me before, like, well, you can't really say that that was a flaw because to somebody else, they're not going to see it.
I think that's also super true though. Like, I mean, I'll take it back to music, right? So you look at like a black metal or punk rock where it's like, you know, things like black metal classically just recorded on like zero hardware garbage, right? And so it sounds and is bad and is basically unlistenable from like a raw analysis perspective. But like, I love it. I have a whole group of friends who love it. And a
Yeah.
whole group of friends who go, I don't know what the fuck you're listening to, but it's not okay. And it's like, you know, it goes both ways where it's like some things, it really just depends on like if it's intentional and welcomed by the community, or if it's like,
So-
it doesn't even have to be intentional, but an aspect of things that is like accepted, legitimized by the community that's participating in. Flashing is another thing, right? Flash lines on Kenner style figures is probably like a-okay for like everyone here, right? But like if you had a really nice large sculpt, you know, like a 6-7 inch like big thing, like if you got one of Jeff's like 1 pound bone ghosts or something, and there was like a huge seam line down the side or something, you'd probably be like, I paid like $150 for this, like what's going on? You're like, that's kind of weird, you know?
So with music, what I find interesting though is it reaches a point where it's actually just a math and a science, and I feel like resin toys are too. There's a certain period where, because of my age, my ear is different. There's a device that exists called the Mosquito. The Mosquito is actually an anti-loitering device that emits a frequency that's annoying to anybody over the ages of like 16 and under or something like that. So the issue is that if I'm 40, writing a track, and I put something right in that frequency range, I've got no idea that is actually annoying as all hell to everybody who's 16 and under, well, my party jam is not going to do so hot. And
Right.
I don't even know why. And at the end of the day, like in my opinion, you could be the most skilled musician in the world. If you're not looking at the data right in front of you, you're not going to be able to manipulate that because your ear's not going to be able to pick up on it. You're at that age, you just can't pick up on that frequency. Toys, what I find is interesting is it does enter into a really weird world with resin where you're playing with a math and a science. And art can use math and science, but it loses some of its freedom of expression, I believe. If you're making a piece because you just want to make a piece and you decide to marble that sucker down, dope. But let's say we look at something like a standard 3.75 figure that's, I think it's like 13.8 grams. So if we were to divide that up and we were to say like each limb, let's say is like 2 grams. So like the 4, 8, and then we're going to say the body is the rest. So you're looking at like 4 grams for the body, 5 grams for the body, and the head. If you know that math, you should be able to look at that arm and say, cool, one arm is 4 grams. If I put that on my scale and I measure that out in resin, 4 grams of resin is 30 milliliters. Therefore, one arm is 30 milliliters. So if somebody asks you for one arm all purple, one arm all green, one leg all yellow, you should technically be able to know how much resin you need per limb to get that done. And that's where I feel like it also gets difficult when you're talking about art and something like toys, because something you're like, well, it's art, man. You have to accept that there's some liberty with art. And you're also sitting there being like, well, you entered into a chemistry class the moment that you mixed that A and B.
It's true.
And if you're going to make me muffins and you're like, I was expressing.
Oh, that's interesting that you say that, because I'm definitely on the absolute far end of that. Like this drop that I'm about to drop on Friday is all one-offs all the colors that came out of it are random, because a big chunk of what I wanted artistically out of this one, the most exciting thing to me artistically about resin is that when you put multiple colors of resin into a thing as liquid, you only have half an idea what it's going to do on the far end. And those completely random colorways at the far end are my favorite thing. But I mean, at the same time, there is a technical aspect that you know, you pick up on after a while. After the fourth or fifth time you've put like liquid into a thing of resin and realize that it just makes it bubble all the hell, like that side of it, there's definitely a technical side where you're like, okay, but
I think actually
that's the same as like, I feel like that's the same like basic thing as like, you know, if you leave a pot of paint open for 2 days, you don't have paint anymore. Like, it's just a mistake that you learn early on.
yeah, I think one of the aspects of resin that actually
I think
makes
if you
it
start getting
interesting-
too technical with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just that like
Sorry,
the
continue.
technical aspect of it. Oh, no worries. It's a little bit lag. I think the actual technical aspect of it is pretty simple. It's like highly simplified for the most part. Like smooth on products are like 99% like 1-to-1 by volume. I have every time I prepare one mold,
Yeah.
I'm preparing 2 at a time. And then like I know, you know, I put my figure in water, like the end thing to get the volume of it, and just have that written down for each one of the molds on the side of the mold, and like make some extra, and then you just mix and pour. And color wise, like I feel similarly. I like the semi randomness. All of them are like one offs because I like just mixing colors. I like the vibrancy that you can get with like with resin that I think is really interesting. That's my favorite part. So it's like I just like mixing the colors, getting some vibrant, interesting result. Chuck anything that's not vibrant, goes into my dead box, and just a bunch of shit in there. And it's like in general, like that's like, I don't know, the process to me is like is actually pretty simple, which is why it's approachable for a lot of people to actually get in and start doing things. Like in theory, you could design all these in CAD, send them, you know, talk to someone in Alibaba and have them printed at a factory for actually roughly what material costs like in resin, right? You can pay $150 for a mold and 50 casts of it from Alibaba. That's one trial unit of Mold Star 15 and 1 gallon unit of whatever for a run, like of you know, Smooth Cast 300 for a run. That's it. Like, you know, and so you could be doing it the other way if you wanted, and that would be like the technical route. I feel. I think actually resin is more of the grunge punk route because it's so just like you're able to just throw shit in, and then like if it doesn't work, you've got slime for sure. But like I've only got, you know, only done that once or twice. So
I'll say too, like
No, I'm with you, and I've also started doing it. Oh, sorry, no, I've talked a lot.
no, go ahead.
No, I want to hear more from you. You've been quiet for a much larger chunk.
Sorry, I just I relate a lot of stuff back to 2D art, but it's like you know, I really appreciate fine art and all the like fancy intricacies. Somebody that's like a master of their craft, like the old masters and all that stuff. But there's also something really awesome about like my kids doing this art where that's like just kind of straight from brain to hand, right? Like, and it's like I want to be like that. I wish I could have more of that in my own work. So that's like, you know, you have both sides of the coin that are really interesting to look at and appreciate.
That's one of my all-time favorite types of post, is the post where an artist that I already like anyway posts the crap they drew when they were like 7. I love that stuff so much.
So I think we probably agree that like a toy could probably be art, whether it was intended to be originally or not. Would you guys say that art can inadvertently be made into a toy, or is art automatically just art?
hell yeah, tear paintings off the wall, turn them into balls of paper with which you throw at your enemies. Like 100%. Like the reverence for anything that is called art is like a joke, right? Like you have to just be able to like recognize what something is. And like if everything is art, like it's not if everything is art, nothing is art. It's just that if everything is art, that means like everything is on a neutral ground in terms of how you can interact with it. So yes, take all art, remix everything, take your favorite movie and, you know, go into After Effects and put mustaches on everyone or something, man. Do whatever you want with it. That's 100%. I think you should be able to play with anything that you get a hold of, especially art. 2 thumbs up from me. It's a good question.
I
like
think
that
the
one.
one caveat being don't destroy the original without permission just for the sake of, you know, net art should be a net addition to the world.
George
so if
Lucas,
it's a
I'm
net
calling you
neutral
out.
because you annihilated something else. But in terms of like pieces of mass-produced toys, taking pieces of music and sampling it for other stuff, taking stuff from movies and doing new things with it, 100%.
I mean, I'll take the other
should
side of that.
always be happening.
I take my masters on so much stuff and I throw it out. I don't care at all. Once I've expressed it, like that's, I think that's a big, like there's an impermanence, right, to like a lot of this stuff that I just like, I love to actively participate in. I've done so many like creative works in my life over time. Like every single one of those goes right into the fucking trash. Like when I'm done, for the most part, I just don't care. And it's like, because once I've expressed it, I'm done.
You made it.
It's done.
So with that, yeah.
Sure.
With that,
but I just think masters
it's absolutely you're
overstated.
right if it's your work.
Totally.
Then
I was just gonna say I struggle with that a little bit, like folks that kind of like take vintage toys and like remix them and repaint and all that kind of stuff. I think it's super cool, but I can't do that myself. I just can't take it. I can't do it. That's why I got into this, like recreating things in resin, because then I can at least kind of halfway keep the original, you know what I mean? And I can mess with the reproduction. But I still like, it's like, I still think it's cool. Just for me, I can't get over that hump.
I'll admit I had to kind of like kill myself.
Well, and that's one thing on a. No, go.
Well, you were literally talking about like, but you shouldn't destroy something to make it a toy. But like I was literally sitting over here destroying something I was informed was art to make it a toy. Because in my opinion, that's like the best example you can use is it's like you're told something's art and you're like, no, that's not art, that's a toy. So it's like,
is that a ghoul card back that you just made to a paper airplane?
but yeah, because now it's a toy.
My pearls. I can't. Oh, I'm just kidding. No, do it. That's the best part.
But I think that's probably the only piece I have in my house that I've been told like that's art. But I've just made it a toy. And
the art was you receiving it. You received the art. You've perceived the art. The art is dead to you. It's simply there as a reminder of what you first saw. Tear it up. Get rid of it.
Well, and at the end of the day, like, are you to know? Are you to know? Like that's what it is. Because at the end of the day, like, again, we were talking about it earlier, is who decides the intent? The artist or the customer? And I think most of us were kind of like, end of the day, customer buys it, they're going to do what they want with it. But that's where we also come back to the very beginning of the conversation where it was kind of like, well, why does it matter if it's art or not? Because if we're not willing to accept somebody who said it's art, then we're kind of disrespecting that person.
It's up to you. The reverence for the term and the idea of art is the interesting thing here, right? Like,
I think the thing I'm finding interesting in the toy community lately is it used to be that you'd see on a packaging adult collectible, not a toy. And your brain kind of understood that was accepting like, okay, like the small parts, don't give it to a child, don't treat it with the same maybe like
Right.
with a toy. But I'm finding more and more and more the language is shifting over to this whole, it's not a toy, all capitals, it's art. Understand there'll be flaws and imperfections. And all of a sudden you're like, the language is changing all of a sudden, I feel. And all of a sudden in the community, it's like almost as if to say it's a toy is a bad word. But to
you've
say
introduced pretentiousness into the market with that. Like, that's the real deal here. Like the reality is so many people in this community are trying to chase after like literal like sub $10 figures from 30, 40 years ago. Like literally like worthless pieces of plastic that made them feel a certain way, right? And like
Mhm.
that's cool. That's awesome.
The
if you're trying
muscle
to replicate
groups,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. The muscle groups are crazy. I've never even heard of those things.
But
And like
the people in the groups are like, if you're spending more than $1 for these figures,
what are you
don't.
doing? Yeah, don't do it. But it's like even just when you're recreating those, right? So it's like, I mean, I don't know, like buy a really expensive figure from someone and like take a magnifying glass and melt its head for fun because it's yours. Their artist intent died when they sold it to you. If they didn't want to sell it to you to preserve its integrity as art, they wouldn't have sold it to you.
Damn.
Like, that's the reality of it. I'm just such I'm an art anti-realist, right? I just don't believe that like art is like a concept that can exist as like a protected class. Like take all things, smash, glue them back together, or don't. I don't care. Like
I kind of like am pushing that angle with like Crumbs mentioned on the last video. Well, let me take a step back. I was quiet for a while because my jaw's a little sore. The You're talking about how art is like basically temporary, right? And it's like the moment you experience it, it's over. And because the last week was about packaging, and someone brought up Apple packaging, and so I was thinking about that while you were talking, and how like Apple puts like all this effort. I'm sure there are other companies that do it too. They put all this effort into the packaging, right? So you have this experience when you open the product. The packaging is beautiful, everything's perfect, everything fits together just right, and like it goes straight into the recycling, right? As soon as you're done. I mean, I kept them for a while because we moved around a lot, but that's whatever. But typically, like packaging is like, it's a good, well-designed packaging is that embodiment of what you're saying. It's like this thing, you see it and appreciate it, and then you like experience opening it, and then you get rid of it. Like it exists just temporarily, in your worldview.
But isn't that what makes things so much more valuable now? Like 20, 30 years later, because they're not available and people like covet them because they're so rare.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like
but the nostalgia of it, of them playing with it, of the people who had used it, is what drives that value, right?
Yeah, and it's like I get wanting to get like a mint on card, or whatever the thing is that you want. But then like if you don't open it, you're not experiencing that same thing. You're just viewing a three-dimensional photo of a memory. Because it's just this thing inside in a box. You can't actually touch it or interact with it. But so what I was going to say about like Crumbs mentioned last week too, because I wasn't able to attend, that I've only done one drop, so, like at all, and so everything shipped disassembled, so it was totally deconstructed. So like you see like the guy here, right? But like you got a bag of parts and like a little booklet that told you how to put it together, and like so it was like a kit. It was meant to be interacted with, right?
Awesome.
And then
it's like Legos. Like the fun of Legos is not the end product. The fun of Legos is the time you spend building it. Like that's the cool part that you remember.
And that's like, so I'm thinking about that. Like I mentioned earlier, like I don't want my stuff to just sit on the shelf. Like if that's what you want to do it. Like you're the owner. But like at one point I'm like doing this, like I'm infusing because you talked about Legos earlier. Like I had a shit ton of Legos growing up, and I have like Technic sets now, and Mindstorms and all that shit. And like, so I'm trying to incorporate that playability, that it's not this like predefined form. It can be that form, but it can also be, you want to put the legs on the arms, go for it. Like, so like trying to keep that, because it keeps reigniting that same newness, that same experience of like, if you can keep reshaping it and reforming it, like you're experiencing the art over and over and over again, as opposed to like, one and done. And it's fine. Like that's not a dig on anyone else, or how they're doing their thing, because everyone's doing their own vision. But it's just like how I kind of view what I'm doing, because I'm just, like I said earlier, I've taken my own kind of journey and just trying to share that with everyone else, and so
I just wanted to pop in just because Scott, you brought up something. I'm curious what you guys feel about it. He basically mentioned that by labeling it not a toy art, it omits the liability of children choking on it or anything. But I feel that could actually be personally. I even mentioned it to him. I think that could actually be tackled with like 14A, not for children, small parts. I'm not sure if I would necessarily say that art sends the message like don't give to kids as much as the other
I
one.
I feel like that disclaimer line, because like you said, the language has changed from like what was the original, like not a toy for adult
Adult
collector.
collectible.
Right. And so now like saying imperfections and stuff. And it alludes a little bit to what Cuddy was saying about like just the rush of people. And again, it's hard, like you said about respect earlier, like, you know, we're talking about these things that are like kind of sensitive. So like I'm trying not to like, you know, come at anyone because that's not what I'm here to do. But I think it can be, that language can be treated like a way to cover your ass, right? It's like, I kind of jumped into this. I don't really know what I'm doing, you know, because whatever that person's bar for their products, their casts and stuff are, you know, is whatever. And it's a way that they can be like, well, I made this thing, like it's not perfect. It's a toy, it's art, you know, and not have to like maintain any bar of quality.
Yep.
And that's fine. Like that's totally fine. Because like some people don't want to strive for like the perfect bubbleless cast with no seam and whatever. Like that's a whole craftsmanship thing. That's a totally separate journey, you know.
And maybe it's even just one of those things too where the intent is just overlapping. Like maybe in their brain they're thinking, I've always seen people warn that it's handmade item, so there's going to be these flaws. And I've also seen people say that it's not a toy, it's art. So I'm going to make sure I say that. And maybe it's actually just these people don't understand that, like, by them saying it's not a toy, it's art, it has flaws, that together in one sentence, it's kind of like saying eat, shoots, and leaves. With the proper punctuation, it's a totally different sentence, right? And so it could even be one of those things. And where you're actually kind of going, misreading the entire intent even of why they're saying it's art. Well,
I agree.
it's tough.
It's a tough one. I don't know. I think again, artist statements are for museums, right? Like it's really hard to like provide an artist statement or any commentary as an artist as to like this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it without like, you know, giving away, like pulling the curtain back a little bit, and like it doesn't in any aspect, right? But like a warning label and the language of that warning label, like if you have to declare it's art, like okay, like, but I wanted to open it and put it on my desk, like is the backer card the art part? Like I don't know, like, and then the thing that a lot of people do is they have like the respect for declared art, right? And like the idea that somebody made it, it's been declared art, it is a thing that's there, that they're interacting with by purchasing it, makes it like that whole package is like an item, right? That whole experience was the artistic experience, they got it, and now it's got some you know sanctity to it, which I think that language helps to like enforce. And I think sometimes that, like, again, writing it, this is art on something is I'm gonna say it, I don't care who doesn't like it, it's pretentious a little bit. I think that you gotta recognize, like, calling anything, like, I think my stuff's like, it's garbage, it's plastic, this is art just like anything else. It's plastic I mixed in my garage and poured into a mold I also made in my garage based off of clay that I bought off the internet. Like that's all it is. Like that's it. That's it. There's nothing more to it. It has what I did to it. Whether you care or not is like not my bag at this point. You know what I mean? It's up to you. So I think writing "this is art," if I were to take all of my stuff and write "this is art" on it, I would feel delegitimized because I don't actually like. Well, I think that it's art. I don't think it's anything special to write that on there. And I actually don't know legally. I don't know if you actually get any coverage or if you're still completely exposed by saying like this is art, not a toy, and then like a kid swallows it. I don't know if that does anything.
I wonder too. I don't know if I'm newer to this community and stuff, so I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of line here, but I wonder if like some people might want to put that like this is art on their art objects to kind of like legitimize it and drive the price up. Like this is a fancy thing. That's why I'm charging so much for it or something. I don't know.
I could definitely see the thought process there, because like to going back to what I said earlier about like our parents and grandparents' definition of art, right? To them, it was like Thomas Kincaid paintings that no one touches, or like museum stuff that no one touches, and so there's this hoity-toity like art is this like
Art is
thing.
over there, right?
Right.
Like that's the
And
thing.
yeah, so like it's by putting that label on, you're trying to elevate yourself to this like, I'm an artist, respect me. Like, you make toys, bro, come on. Like,
Chill.
just embrace it.
Brought up price, and I think price is really funny because like I was saying earlier, like the Uze Blue Stars is actually $1,800. The retro Boba Fett broke world records on eBay auctions. So then they're like, those are toys. They're just straight the fuck up toys.
Right. Fucking Black Lotus.
I mean, what's Black Lotus sitting
Ain't got
at right
eggs.
now?
$25,000.
25,000.
Ink on paper.
And when
Hey man, magic cards
That's
are
a
more than just
painting.
cardboard, okay? It's different.
like
It's magic
somebody
cards.
commissioned
No.
that painting, somebody made that. At the end of the day, like that is art that has been made into a trading card game that is still $20,000.
Can we just
You play Magic.
talk for 2 seconds about how the Venn diagram of people who collect art toys and the people who play Magic is just one fucking circle?
Is that a thing here? Because I've
Yeah.
been playing Magic for only 20 years. So
But the boxing
Yeah.
gloves come out the
Yep.
moment that you all say fucking Commander. When you say Commander,
I want to.
Magic
I
stops.
literally, we're trying to put together. I want to put together a toy artist commander group.
I'll play. I'll be in that any day.
Yes,
Tabletop
I'm in.
Simulator is
We can
so
play on
fun to play
Tabletop
Commander on.
Simulator.
DM me
Yes.
and we'll put
Yes.
something together.
Yeah.
100%. I'm down.
All right. I'm in.
Crumbs is like, I don't play Commander. Fuck that.
Is
No.
Crumbs over there like crying because we said Commander?
Yeah, he's like, oh,
You say
they
you're
want
not a
Commander.
fan of?
I don't play Commander, and admittedly,
I mean, I'll play 60 card too.
in a gatekeeping, our town is like Commander gate kept. If you don't have a 100 card singleton deck, get the fuck out, bro.
Commander is fun because like
Why?
the thing to me with Commander is it's so expressive. It's very
Oh, yeah.
expressive as a format
Yeah.
because like you just get to
Yes.
develop whatever you're trying to do. Like if there ever was a place for jank and like raw expressive Magic playing, it is Commander. Like that's it.
Yeah.
It's everyone just do whatever you want.
Yep.
It's great.
I got like 25 decks.
Yeah. You just do it because you're like, I want a frog
Yeah, I've
deck.
got
How do I
I've
make
got
frogs?
a drawer with like 30 decks in it
Okay, so what are we
because
talking
building commander decks is just too much fun.
about? Venn diagram, right?
It seems that Sachi was actually saying lawyers can talk down total damage awarded when disclaimers are posted. So
I'm
apparently,
just saying,
they benefit.
Uh-huh.
maybe. Just say don't eat this on the back. Then you don't have to say it's art.
So,
Can I just want to have every piece that I make from now on be called "Don't Eat This" with like just different
Don't eat
colors
this.
and fonts.
Just make
And
food
then just
items
roll
like
from
perfect
there.
food replicas and say don't eat this.
Yeah.
to be
Don't
fair,
eat this.
vomiting droid actually, I'm pretty sure said like you don't need to feed them and don't try to eat them. And you're like,
That's beautiful,
legit.
though.
Like,
I love that guy. That guy is going back to the like artist statement and the story behind the stuff. I love that guy's whole setup of like the acid wasteland that they come from and the little story bits that we get, and like his live videos where he just posts like the camera pointed straight at a figure with weird music in the background for like 10 minutes straight. I eat that shit up.
vomiting droid is a very, very, very unique and special individual. I was really bummed he didn't want to come in for an interview, but he said a lot of, because I was basically like, if I was an alien and you had to describe to me what you do, how would you describe it? And some of the shit he said was like just as like weird and beautiful as he himself is. You know what I mean? Like they're like reading over this huge paragraph, being like, "No vomiting droids." Like this, yeah, okay, this is weird and strangely awesome. And he's somebody again that, you know, like how do you look at those pieces and not almost kind of look at like a Jackson Pollock and think this is art? And he's not telling you it is, but
Yeah.
everything in your senses is screaming at you that it is.
It's evocative.
And is that maybe what's important about a piece to make it art?
I think
I
it
mean,
makes a piece
I think
special.
that's part of it.
That's
I
personal.
think that there's a flip side. Whoop. Sorry, I'm in rural Oregon at the moment, so I think I'm sitting on like a 5-second delay of everything I say.
I think you got the space now, bud.
Oh, all I was saying is like I had thought about it, but I don't think it came up like right at the start of the conversation too. Is like sometimes there's stuff that just isn't art in the toy community, and I think it's when the intention is fully commercial and mass produced, and I was talking with somebody about it recently. I can't remember who, but we kind of reached another definition that we thought kind of worked, which was like, if it is in no way designed to aim at an adult sensibility, but like solely a developing child sensibility, and it has that wholly commercial aspect to it, like I don't know, like the little Playmobil people or that kind of thing. Like there's a certain point where you look at a piece and you're like, that's not art.
I don't. Okay, so
And
I'll
even
take.
then, I'm
I'll
sure
take
there
the
are
other
people who
side.
fight me on
Someone
that.
just had like a Playmobil figure. They did like a repaint of just like a Playmobil dude, and it made me kind of realize that I kind of like the goofy aesthetic of the Playmobil figures because they're weird. They're like just weird and like ovoid, like at all points. And I was like, that's so like they're not like Lego figures where they like are meant to interact with the world. They're just like strange. And like, so I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was like a Bart Simpson, like they repainted like a Bart Simpson.
What bums me out is Epoxy Crusader has this guy, and then the other one that you're seeing is Allowed Space Lab, and they've got the turtle, Kermit the Frog version. That's actually like a Ninja Turtle, and then this one's like the
Okay.
yeah, Playmobil is absolutely a very like childlike design.
Yeah.
What I find neat is, so again, Bootleg Sewer Mutant says his are just toys. This is a marbled cast that he sculpted the whole thing and he hit it up with paint.
Oh,
He only makes
Just a toy. Don't worry about it.
just toys.
Just toy.
And they'll always be just toys. So it does reach a point where, again, you start wondering, you're like, well,
I mean, I agree with him. I think they're right. I think that is just a toy, right? But that doesn't stop it from being art as well. It's just a toy, but like there's artistry put into it, right? There was decisions that were made. There was things that like that's like where you talk about like elevating it into art, right? Where it's like while I agree everything is art already, right? That's my like stated position. Like you can elevate things into the realm of like artistry where you've done something with it with intention, right? And that would be like, yes, it is just a toy, but you have done the requisite work to elevate that into the realm of like an artistry, you know, an artistic piece.
I would argue to say
well, it's interesting too because like
it's just a painting. It's
just painting.
Yeah. And I think like that's what becomes tough is like, well, again, it comes right back to the personal person, like the opinion. Like they're gonna decide, but you can't really actually decide.
well, that's the thing though, is it's definitions too, right? Because like words have actual meanings. I love that guy, I love his work, but I don't think I agree with him because like how many of his pieces were sold to children to play with?
Is a toy something that's necessarily for a child to play with?
I think that's the working definition of a toy. Okay, I mean, if we want to get a bunch,
I can give you
broader
other
definition
definitions of toys.
toy, that's a very different conversation.
I think the idea that words have meanings is like words have meaning to a point, right? Words convey an idea, right? And so the conveyance of that idea is what a word is there for. That's the whole purpose. So if a word is not suiting like the meaning that's there, like is the word effectively like if the word is not effectively conveying the meaning, do you need to change the definition of the word, or do you need to change the definition, like change the meaning behind it, right? So this is like if you have a toy, a small painted toy, a hunk of plastic that I use to dump spare Smoothcast 300 into, right? Like this is a toy. This is technically the same thing that a piece of, that I sell in my shop. It's a piece of art, right? But it's like there's no distinction there, right? It's a distinction without a difference between like the toy and art. So you can say it's just a toy. This is just a toy. This is just, to me, this is just a piece of plastic. This doesn't mean anything, right? It's got bad flashing on the front. It's got bubbles on the top. It's worthless to anyone and everything, right? But it sits on my desk like art because I made it, and so it gets to sit there, right? But it's like it's worthless. So I mean, that to me is like the definitions fail here, right? They fall apart on the boundaries of like when you get to subjective material, and almost always like, what is blue? What does a blue really mean? And it's like, where do you actually, like, this little Reagan figure is like, it's blue, right? But like, I don't know, it's like, it's not quite navy. I would say like, it's not like a true blue, right? It's like almost like I don't know, it's weird. It's not blue. It's like blue, but it's almost green, kind of. And it's like,
Well,
you know what I mean? Like you
definitions
lose.
fall apart even more when you think about people with like disabilities, like someone who's colorblind. Like green, they don't what the fuck that means. They just like, they know that this color is what you call green. So it's like, it's just perception. And then you said comes about like how, the auditory range like shrinks as you get older. And like, I have mild tinnitus. So like, there's certain low things like I can't hear, like it just can't, it's just mud. And, so like you said, it's all, what do they mean? It's all just perception. Words are things we've agreed have a meaning, but that's just a tentative agreement, and that those meanings can change for cultural reasons or, personal reasons or whatever. So yeah, it's like, it's tough to quantify something like what is a toy, what is blue, what is art, like, because they're just these fluid things that are always changing. I mean,
there's no platonic ideal of art, right? Like that is the idea here.
What stuck out for me probably the most is when I first joined the community, I was hesitant and nervous. I probably told everybody, like, I love your art, love your pieces. I was talking to Magoob, and I straight up said to Magoob, like, dude, what do you call them? Is it art? Is it toys? And he was like, they're one and the same. And to me, that's coming from somebody who they understand a toy is what I understand a toy is. They respect it the same. You're not going to say, like, art is here and a toy is here, or vice versa. It's just kind of like, dude, they're interchangeable. And so suddenly you get kind of comfortable with that idea where it's like they're interchangeable. But the issue is that everybody's definition of a toy is interchangeable because they're not willing to assign it the same value, whether it be higher or lesser. And I feel that that's when all of a sudden it does get a little bit difficult to try and navigate. Well, do you just say, I love your pieces? I love your work?
I love your work. That's my go-to for any artist. Love your work.
Yeah.
I have to agree though, like you get into
good words.
But you get into like pop art or folk art that might have a negative connotation to the artist. You know what I mean? Yep. But that's what someone interprets that piece as being. I also find it interesting. Like I always thought.
I referred to my stuff as.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, you first.
I was going to go on a tangent. You go ahead.
I was just super briefly. I was going to say that I just referred to my stuff as trash art in a recent post, and then had to defend myself against somebody trying to tell me that my stuff was better than that. And I was like, no, like I'm not using it as a pejorative. It's a genre of art. I like it. I'm not saying that my stuff is crappy.
I was gonna say too that I think it's interesting we're talking about like language here, because I always thought that artwork was a type of a language, like you're trying to convey something, like speak through this medium, and that was for a long time my definition of what true art really was. So if it was something that that you made at home or if it was something that you made in a studio, it didn't really matter. What mattered is that you were expressing yourself somehow through some sort of artistic medium.
Yeah, like I don't think when I'm working at my desk, I'm not like I'm making art. When my partner comes up, she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm not like I'm making art today. I'm just working on my toys. Like my name is Nostalgia Toys, not Nostalgia Art. Like, you know, I'm an
It's
artist.
just downer energy, man. I just got just projecting vibes, bro.
Yeah, like I consider myself an artist, but I don't think about it like I'm making art, right? Like that's up for other people to decide. I'm just making stuff that I like. I'm calling it toys and I'm putting it out there. And you want to call it art, call it art. You want to call it toys, call it toys. It doesn't affect how like I feel about the stuff I'm doing. What label someone puts on it. So,
but I think that's what makes that your work good.
All right,
Good. Like
y'all.
that's the whole
I
deal
got
about.
to I got to hop off here.
Later, bud.
Damn it. I feel like it happens the worst between our two computers.
I know.
Too.
No
I do
worries.
got to hop off though, guys. The household is heading to bed for the evening, and it is not a large house. So it's been great talking to everybody. If I'm not currently following any of you, I think I'm on everyone already. But if I'm not, send me a message on here so that I can actually get it linked up.
Cool, man. Have a good night.
yeah.
I
Have a good
will
night.
talk to everybody in the near future, I am sure.
He has a drop on Friday too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Got that stimmy check. Might have to give me some stuff.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that passion of like doing something for you, what you think is cool, what you appreciate and you like, is what makes that stuff really good. Like, all you guys in here, I would totally agree that that's why I'm attracted to your stuff. Most of the folks in the community, it's that way. That's part of the reason this has an allure to me. Is it's people making what they want to make in cool, unique ways that they want to express themselves or do something unique with that. As opposed to that, like making something to sell a ton of units or, trying to appease a certain demographic or whatever, things like that. And so whether you want to call that art or not, I think it's cool.
I mean, there's validity in selling though. So like when I finally built up to putting out the first set, which was all one-offs. We were talking about that earlier. Different colors and stuff. And I was like, well, this is the real test, right? This is where I find out if people actually like it or they just, like it. And I've definitely hemorrhaged way more cash into this hobby than like I'll ever make back. So it's not about making like, some ridiculous living off of it. But like the sales, it's going to be compensated for your time. You're still doing work. You're still creating stuff. But it's the sales are a validation that like there is interest, right? Because like this is a very expensive hobby to do, or art form. Sorry if we're talking about art. It gets very expensive to do just in a black hole, right? Just dumping money into it. Like I've spent thousands of dollars surely on equipment and supplies and failures.
You're in a grand on like a decent vacuum chamber and pressure pot. Like that's and an air compressor, like easy.
Yeah. I've probably spent at least, maybe not $1,000, but probably close to it. And then easily like at least a couple grand and just in resin and silicone alone. And so that's like the deficit of what I would have to sell just to break even is already like so high.
Really high on like small value item, right? Like $20 a piece. That's a lot of road work to cover.
Yeah. But like those sales validate that like, there's not that you need a reason to keep going, but there's like an incentive. It incentivizes like continuing like refining your process or creating new pieces or like thinking about where do you want to go? Do you want to pivot to a different thing and see how that goes? It helps fund your creation of that art. Yeah. And like this is all I'm doing this is my full-time gig now because I have a very generous partner. But you know, so like I could essentially do it into like a black hole of debt, but like I would like to potentially, you know, make some of that back so that I'm not just wasting money, like not wasting money, but you know, just throwing money away and creating stuff or whatever. But it's that validation, I think, is like what sales translate to for me personally is like that there's a, you know, there's an incentive to keep going. And not to take a long chunk of time here, but to jump back to something we were talking about earlier was the Instagram community and saturation. We're talking about how like customers and artists there's a lot of overlap there. And personally, I try to attack that from like diversification of platforms, like trying to, I don't want to put all my eggs in the Instagram basket because like, what if like, I don't know, they like, everyone worries about the algorithm and stuff. And what if it changes or what if like it gets sold off because, you know, there's an antitrust case against Facebook and then it gets torpedoed and just goes down. Like what happens then, right? If all your eggs are in the Instagram basket, you're just like, you have to just start over from scratch somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like it's, so diversifying like platforms isn't just good for, you know, getting your art in front of like more people who could potentially appreciate it because there's 7 billion people in the world. So there's no shortage of eyeballs. But like, it also broadens that potential, not just customer base, but like maybe other artists you could influence or people who are like, they see it and they're like, oh, that's really cool. I never thought about doing that. And maybe it spurs other people to like, you know, tap into some creativity of their own. Cause like you know, you can only sell to your towns for so long before everyone's got your thing and they don't need any more of your thing. So
you must colonize other areas.
yeah.
The reality is though that personally, like I notice it when I do the videos, for instance. We've talked, you and I, before about the metrics, and I don't even really care about the metrics anymore other than actions taken. When I see that like literally it might have 30 likes, but it got 20 actions where 15 of them went to the profile and then you check how many people clicked on your link, I'd rather see that. That's way more important to me now than likes. How many people actually went back to the page? Because the reality actually is, and I've heard some of the homies even say it, dude, I saw you sat down to so-and-so and he seems like a really cool dude. And the reality is it has nothing to do with me doing the unboxing. I've already met this artist and said to my homies, like, man, they're a really fucking cool guy. And then you keep on trying to tell them, like, hey, remember how, like, when you saw Sucklord, you'd watch, like, his movies and you'd see his face in front of the camera and you'd get to know him and you fell in love with him as a person? Yeah, your fans will fall in love with you as a person if you expose yourself a bit and put yourself out there a little bit more. And what they don't realize is that something they're like, oh, crumbs, man, like, I appreciate you doing that. And you're like, I didn't do anything other than give you the confidence to actually just put yourself out there. Because that's all you had to do. If you just put your face out there and said, I'm so-and-so, you're going to meet people who become more quote-unquote friend fans. They like you. And because they like you, they want to like every single one of your posts. They want to try and get your work. They want to try and make sure that they're sharing your drops because it's no different than in the music scene. When you find out your homie dropped a song and he's your homie, you're fucking sharing that link.
Dude, I've handed out posters at people's show for like bands I don't even like. And I'm sitting there handing out like their mixtape and their posters because they're my friend. And I'm just like, hey, I fucking hate this music, but you might like it. Just take it.
Or your buddy is the person who's promoting the show. So you don't even care about the band, but your homie needs to make sure that like tickets are sold and get
all of a sudden your street team happens real quick. Yeah.
I would say like I don't think enough individuals do think of that. Like you are your brand. Even myself, sometimes I kind of forget that it's like, unfortunately, I've kind of put myself in this position where you're like, oh crap, I'm now put myself in a brand. You have to still like uphold a very particular level of conscious headedness, I guess. Because unfortunately, like you piss off the wrong person and you now are a brand. It doesn't just affect you. You can't just kind of be like, oh, I go to bed tonight and I'm Aaron, I'm good. Like, oh, I'm Cody, I'm good. It's like, no, like, unfortunately, like, people are like, yo, that neo-nostalgia guy.
He's an asshole.
Right. And And it can happen so quickly because people's imaginations and everything else. And that's where even at the beginning I was kind of like, hey, like what's art, what's toy, does it matter? Because at the end of the day, like again, like we've kind of kept on getting back to that where it's like you can't fucking please everybody in the scene.
Just can't.
Can't please anyone, everyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, gotta segment that market, man. It's the only way you can. You like find these little slices. You're like, these people like this thing. These people like this thing. It's not about like trying to see those slivers as profits, but like it's like people who resonate with things that you're doing, right? Because like it, I don't know. I guess just for me personally, it like if I make something that people get excited about, that excites me. Because then I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I'm really psyched that people like that. So maybe I could iterate on that, or I could do like an offshoot or a spin-off or something. Not to like, tap the same well or whatever, but like I when I used to collect more carded figures, like some people would bitch about repaints, but like I thought they were cool. I was like, oh, I get to see this thing in like this different cool color scheme or whatever. And some of the repaints were like my favorite ones. And if like, they hadn't, the company hadn't done that, it just wouldn't have existed, or maybe I would have done it or something.
Yeah.
So like, it's like the pick your battles thing. Like you can't win every battle. Like you just try to divert your energy where you can make a little bit of progress, whether that's like artistically or in a personal connection or a sale or whatever. Like, I don't know what I'm saying.
If you paint vintage figures, I'll hunt you down. I'll say that. If you're painting vintage figures, I'll hunt you down.
No, I get that entire vibe what you're throwing out there. Like the whole thing, like the first message I got from someone that was like, I actually like your artistic vision on something. And I was like, I don't know how you even got one out of that. My figure's garbage, but thank you. And they're like, no, like seriously, I like it. And then they like wanted a specific one and they messaged me when they didn't order, and they bought like one of everything from my store. And I was like, you don't have to spend money on like I feel like I like the imposter syndrome sets in where you're just like, you don't have to just like do that to be nice, man. Like I don't worry about it. And it's like, who's gonna throw you $50 to be nice like that, like over Instagram? Don't never even talk to me before. It's a weird thing where it's like that validation circle, like it hits really good when it's someone you don't even know, when it's like there's just somebody in there. Like I don't know anyone in this community really, but it's like somebody. Yeah, that's like the real stuff, right? Somebody I'm not interacting with or whatever, and they just like, hey, it's legitimate. And it feels good. Just feels good. Yeah. And from a brand perspective, like that's what you want, right? You want these people who are not just people you're talking to, because if it's just people you're talking to, it's not a brand. You're developing friendships, right?
Right.
And then you're developing friendships with like strange ulterior motives sometimes, because you're like, hey dude, we're friends, right? Like you're gonna share my posts, right? Because I share all of yours, right? That expectation gets built in, right? And like you sort of play into that sometimes. I know a lot of people do it. I see lots of just random sharing. I think pretty much everything here is cool, so it doesn't really bother me. But you wonder how much of that is present, and that's what gets like, seeing someone from outside of that, from someone you haven't talked to, all of a sudden just like buy everything in your shop, and you're like, oh, okay, like dope. That's like that's wow, that's meaningful,
So say that's not me. Like I don't I haven't sold anything. I don't like have ulterior motives in sharing things or whatever. I'm here for the love of it. I'm trying to learn and like kind of just show my progress along the way. And I think it's just cool to me that I've been kind of accepted. Like people are into what I'm doing there, because I'm not even really, I haven't made anything worth selling in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like,
just do it.
It's
put it up there, man. That's I felt the same way. Like, I don't know, I've only been like active on Instagram and sculpting and doing things for a little bit longer, but like only active on Instagram for like I think 2 months or so, where I've been like just talking and like looking at people's work and like really engaging in it. And it was like a couple weeks ago. I was just pulling things because I like the color, doing pours because I was mixing colors and like mixing mica powders, getting cool, neat colors and stuff like that. Working on getting molds, like working and stuff like that and everything. And then all of a sudden I was like, so I saw someone do a drop on something that was like what I would call like folk art style, where it's like very rough, unthinned paints and stuff like that. And I was like, that's awesome. And they were like, and it sold out like instantaneously. And I was like, people actually like buy these things. Like I just thought people like did it and like handed them out. I was expecting trades to be like the primary fashion. Like everybody's just trading art. That's just cool. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. And you make a drop, and then all of a sudden you say recoup like your materials cost when people like who just want to actually like get a hold of it. It's like that's to me, that's all I need. If I'm recouping materials costs, I am like net positive forever, right? Like it's on anything, right? If I paid for a gallon of smooth on, like we're set. Like that's it. That's just enough validation forever, right? And you get one person who sends you a message. It's like, I love your work. And you're like, oh.
It would be cool. All my money would just go to you guys.
No, you don't have to buy my stuff. You want something? If somebody really wants something and they message me, I'll probably just send it. I don't make it. It's
Don't say
already
that.
a hole. I know, but it's already a hole. It's just throw money into.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Like, it's not good enough to sell, right? Like, I struggled with that last year, and I'm struggling with it right now. So I can really feel myself in that statement where I'm like, there's like, I'm like, oh, there's a little bubble on this peg, like garbage.
Throw it out.
Into the parts bin it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like for me, it feels like a learning process. Like it's like sketching. You know what I mean? Like it's not quite a final piece yet. But maybe someday I'll feel that way.
My biggest recommendation is someone who's had varied amounts of success and varied amounts of artistic fields is you just put it out there. You just do it. It doesn't matter what quality you think it is. It's always better than what you think it is, almost invariably, right? Unless you're like never done anything before and you like drew a stick figure and you're just like, I mean, there's obviously like a bar here, but like for the most part, you're almost invariably better than you think you are. And it's almost always worthy of putting out there for somebody else to at least experience. Even if you don't sell anything, you go in with zero expectations, right? Print those CDs, right? Like literally call it, like you can get, if you make an album, you can write an album with a guitar and a fucking web microphone and you can put it on CDs for $20 and you can get 100 of them. Like do it. Like, why not? Like it's $20, you know? It's the same. Get a big cartel site. It's $9 a month. And then like, just put your work up on there and it's like, it's done. Somebody can buy it if they want and they don't have to. And it's just cool. It's just cool if somebody does, but you'll never know until you try.
Yeah, it's like that. We're our own worst critic. Like that is, it's very, very true. Because like you were just saying, you're gonna see every flaw. You're gonna look because you made the thing. Like if it met the vision in your mind with the end product, and if you see any deviation in that, you're gonna be like, oh, it's garbage. But like other people don't have, even other great artists aren't gonna have the same. They don't have your vision in your mind, right? So like they're not gonna nitpick every single thing that you see wrong with it. They're gonna be like, this looks great, like, and they'll love something about it that like you didn't even see.
Yeah.
So yeah, just put it out there and let people decide if they like it or not. So
If I'm not mistaken, you're kind of taking more at the Kerfloss approach. You're currently playing with some wax pulls, and you're making
not wax, but lots of iterations.
I've been playing with wax. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, doing some stuff with just trying to figure that out. Like I've always been a 2D artist, so this is kind of my first foray into 3D stuff. And I was really drawn into it watching what Kerfloss is doing, and I really like how it's almost instructional, educational, the way his posts go.
I love his stuff.
Yeah. And so I'm just kind of following along and like trying it out, and it's been really fun, and I've learned a ton of stuff. And I also am like him. Like I really appreciate that forced design based on the production, limitations of those original kind of Kenner figures, because they had to do a solid mold, so you can't have the undercuts and things like that. And I just like, what an amazing challenge. Like I think that's super cool that he's doing that. And I'm kind of inspired by that. So yeah, that's kind of, I think I'll be doing a little bit more of that in the future.
Nostalgia, actually, like not to toot his horn, he can speak it for himself, but he does have hours and hours and hours as well of instructional content on YouTube and Twitch and
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took a break from streaming. I'm waiting for this to be more comfortable for me to talk for hours a week. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say the stuff that I was posting is I guess it's like instructional in a loose kind of way. It's more like I write postmortems about like what I did and what went wrong and what went right and what I learned. So like curve loss is definitely more in the like, these are the steps, right? Do this thing, do this thing, do this thing. And then he'll kind of recap at the bottom, like what worked and what he had issues with. Like you said, because he's trying to recreate this like this specific process. And whereas like I'm kind of just talking in depth about like what I did, what I was thinking about, what issues I ran into. Because like every time I make something, I'm learning something new. And before we got on, I don't know if this whole thing has been live or not, but at the very beginning, I was talking about how I like just learned yesterday that I could bake epoxy sculpt to speed up the cure time to 5 minutes instead of 24 hours. And I was like, because like
the heat gun, you got to hit it with the heat gun
I have
to get the quick ones.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I have a heat gun too, and so like yeah, I mostly just talk about like what I'm doing, and I try to explain it in a way that if someone's new to resin casting or new to making molds or whatever, that like maybe there's some things in there that they're struggling with that maybe I like talk about where they can be like, oh, this is what I was doing wrong, or I could try this or that instead of what I was doing. So I just try to be like transparent about like what I'm doing. I know there used to be, I don't know if there still is, a lot of like secrecy about techniques and stuff and how people do things. I'm just like, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. Fuck it. Like
I hate that secrecy. I hate that.
Yeah.
Like the like all artists, if you like truly actually like are involved in that medium and you like it, it should be like your primary goal. Like think of anything that you get stoked on and you want people to like know about. Like why would you not share that? Right?
Yeah.
Like why are you not telling people everything about this? Like there's no, it's not some elite club just because you know it. It's like just like share, like get like that's how you
artist, musician, craftsman that like throughout history is like taught other people how to do it. Like you're just using materials you bought at a store, you're mixing them together and pouring them in a box. Like it's not fucking rocket science. Like there are little things, like there are gotchas that you learn, things that you screw up and you learn later, like usually by trial and error, because it's all obscure information. So I just try to be transparent and talk about like the struggling points that I ran into, and I'm doing something different than curve loss, but in the way where like I'm trying to take like the original designs of the figures, produce them exactly like that, but then add features to them. So like I have like hollow bodies, everything snaps together. So there's like fit and everything is really important. So like I talk a lot about like where I struggled and where I think like, oh, this mold like collapsed here, so now this part's too thin, so I have to redo that. And just trying to share, like pass on the stuff that I've like learned by screwing up, and help other people learn. And I'm very transparent. If someone like messages me or comments like, how did you do this? Like I'll write a book and a comment about it. So I want to try to restructure stuff for YouTube a little better, because I was just taking Twitch streams and putting them straight to YouTube, which is not the best thing, but it's there. There's 40 times 4, there's what, 1,600 hours of video, so or 160 hours, I can't do math.
I'm gonna watch all of it.
But it's all on there, me just jabbering to whoever's in the chat and working on stuff. And you'll see me spilling silicone and having little beads to measure volume go everywhere, and I'll curse occasionally at my cat. It's great.
the one on YouTube, my favorite is Craftsman. You ever watch those videos? Dude, I was so inspirational. Like last year, I was like so down and just like watching all those, just like the COVID, like just grind the whole time, like the desk bed thing forever. And I was watching those and I was like, I love this. I love everything about this. Like that's what made me want to like actually start, like people who are sharing information like that made me want to start actually like casting things, because that was been like toward even just before COVID is when I started getting to like sculpting, just doing things like making things out of clays, right? Like I was like a kind of in a creative slump, and I was like, I just got to start. I got to pick something else to do and like do it. I was making video games with people and stuff like that, and like that's cool. I'm just not great with like, as funny as it is, I like went to art school. I'm like I was a designer. I'm a software engineer now who works on like consumer products. And then it's like I can sit down and like I can't make like technical art for like a game at all. I'm just like not that type of creative. But like sitting down with something in my hand, like it was great. And so I was doing that, and then I was like, this is fun. And I just have like a bunch of like little Sculpey things that I have around from that. And then I was like, oh, but you can make cool things with that. You can do interesting things. And it's like it takes somebody sharing that technique. I was like, I had no idea. I know I thought that shit was totally inaccessible. And I was like, oh, I can buy a trial thing of like smooth cast and mold fast or mold fast on Amazon and like be done with it. It's now happening like instantaneously. And I was like, oh, okay, that's crazy. Had no idea. You don't even know where to start, right? And so it's a whole. And then Kerfloss actually is the one who taught me about like the Asbro and Kenner wax. And like I bought a block of the Asbro wax now to like try to actually like I have a 3.5 that I'm working on now that I'm like going to like actually or 375, right? That I'm actually going to like attempt to like actually go through the process like how Kerfloss has done it, or and like just from watching, I was like, that's actually, because I use Monster Clay, and it's like I see I vibe with the tool marks. I like all that stuff in it. I like seeing that in the final cast. I think that's neat from my perspective, but like I want to try something that's like a little bit more fine detailed, right? But like I would have no idea. I had no fucking clue on earth that there was like a whole separate.
You might be interested in there's another product called Cosclay. It's there's this guy I follow on Twitch. It's C Not Brush. And he's a sculptor. He sculpts like big pieces. Like he does commission fantasy art sculptures. He uses this stuff called Cosclay. And so it's like Sculpey, where he works in layers and bakes it incrementally. Mm-hmm. And he just bakes it in his home kitchen oven. And apparently it's semi-flexible when it's fully baked. Wow. And so like he'll talk about like, what he's doing or whatever, like while he only live streams. I don't think he has I think he's got an Instagram that I haven't followed yet, but he'll like, you can ask questions and stuff, and he'll talk about like, sculpting techniques and whatnot. He's pretty fucking good. Like the pieces that he makes are really intricate, but there's like, he doesn't mold or cast anything. The shit's too big, and he ships it like full size. But it's like it's a good sculpting resource. There's not a big presence on Twitch for people who do what we're doing. Yeah. It's definitely a weird field to navigate, because the art community is much smaller than like the larger game community. But there is definitely some resources on there, not resources, I should say, but like there are artists on there that are worth following and checking out. And if you're just generally interested in sculpting, C Not Brush is worth checking out.
Yeah, so definitely will.
Well, I think at this point we've tackled the discussion topic and have kind of
lots of tangents
and some chatting. You guys feel like this is a good point to kind of end it for the evening and recap on another evening?
Sure,
I'm comfortable with that.
Dirty.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in, guys, and
yeah, sure,
putting in some of your insight and stuff. And it was nice putting some faces to the brand, and hopefully see it some other ones.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. I love talking about just anything like this. I love like just getting in there and talking with other people about it. It's the fun. That's like the juice of the community right there. It's like everybody like being able to get in and talk, right? Like, and Instagram's hard with that. Instagram doesn't provide that like at all. So
no. What are your guys' handles? I don't think I know you guys yet.
I'm at downer.energy.
Downer Energy.
I am Death and Strawberries.
Okay. yeah, if I'm having like good conversations, I definitely want to like, okay, I got both of you guys.
Death and Strawberries, I was totally gapping on your name earlier. And I even said too, I was like, but the moment I see him, then put it to it. But when you just hear it, it's floating out in the space still, you're like, fuck. I should know. I should know this. I just saw it. And I could actually remember your email, but because we're doing live YouTube, I was like, well, I'm not about to say his email.
Yeah, that's a unique one too.
I'll just keep on thinking on this. All right, cool. Well, thanks so much, guys. And everybody try to have a great rest of the evening. And
Yeah, thank you.
who ended up participating in the chat?
Thanks for having us.
Never. I knew.
Dope. Take it easy, guys.
All right, see ya.
Bye.